success today and tomorrow, and never forget that often limits like fear are just an illusion. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, hello. So good morning, everybody. Sorry for the slight delay, but I think we should still be okay with time. Thank you so much for being here today. I was just telling Fabrizio this morning, it's a very good thing that you arrived yesterday, because if it snowed yesterday, you may have said, I don't know if I show up. So we've got you here now, so it's good. And hello to everyone online. I hope you can hear me fine as well. And so let's get started. So just a little bit about the Serengeti Park. We have approximately 1,500 animals in the park, and it's natural enclosures without barriers for keeping you from observing them. So the whole point is to try to give them as much of a natural environment as possible, and so that the animals can move freely around the park. And we have a lot of research opportunities that are available for interested researchers, professors, students. We also have our Safari Schule that increases educational opportunities to raise public awareness. We are a very biodiverse location. And for example, we have an ongoing project with the IZW, with the rhino, with which Dr. Thomas Hildebrandt will do a presentation online. So essentially, Serengeti Park is a mix of opportunities with which, if you're interested, please contact us. We will be happy to have you. So for the conference, like Fabrizio was mentioning, it was an idea of mine after having a meeting with a friend, and it was decided, why don't we have a conference that also integrates students? Because the more I hear about it, it's that students don't always have the platforms to come and put and show their projects, or the programs are so tight that it doesn't allow room to have newer ideas, maybe workshops that the common general person can use. So the idea of the IMZRCB is to sensibilize people, including the general public, about biodiversity, because we hear it all the time now with the climate change. Global awareness is growing about what's going on the planet. People are doing their part to enhance species support, reduce the endangered species list. So what we want to do is also do our part to share the information of what we're doing, so that the rest of the world, the general public, because it goes on our YouTube page, they can also view the work. We also want to be solution oriented without moving backwards, so to have a future visioning of what we want to do with our work. And we hope that the IMZRCB will be a call for action. So we light a fire under people, essentially. We have 3 conference themes. So the topics that you would hear today would cover science policy interaction, comparative animal behavior and adaptations, as well as animal visitor interactions. So Fabrizio briefly mentioned our flagship species support program, and it is something that's fundamental to the planet's biodiversity, so that we can play a role in improving the biodiversity of a specific region in the world. So it doesn't have to be an endangered species, but it has to be a species that is very crucial to the balance of that ecosystem. So we also want to eventually evaluate the results of our work, let's say, and suggest ideas for change. So this year we chose the cheetah. We will be working with the Cheetah Conservation Fund through their bush block project, where none of this works. So these are thorn bushes that are very integral in the area. However, they damage the cheetahs, which run really, really fast. They can run to the thorn bushes, get hurt, and you see the damaged eye on this animal. And so the group decides that they want to be able to clear the bush blocks and create this low emission, high fuel biomass. This allows also the people in the community to sell these products. It helps to reduce 2 of Africa's biggest problems, electrification and poverty. So essentially, you see the domino effect of our program. So we want to be able to expand on it. Me and the team will think about how we can integrate people in, bring ideas together, and find the next species of the year for us. So briefly, we have 3 travel award winners. Again, I wanted to highlight the role of students and that we also want to increase their opportunities to get a taste into the research world. So this travel award allows our students to come and we cover the cost of their travel. We provide some percentage off of their housing, but it really just gives them the opportunity to be here and learn more and network. So our winners are Michu Weimar, please let me know if I mispronounce your name, Ricardo Lemos de Figueredo, and Rick Muirlin-Dykes. So congratulations. And lastly, 2 more things, sorry. We have a best presentation survey, which you may have seen in your sports bags. So please, as the day goes by, consider how you would want to rate the listed presentations. So we have the best talk and the best poster. A poster will be online, so please be sure to see it on a TV screen in the Savannah when you go over there. And for the online attendees, that poster will be presented live. However, our on-site poster presenters will have their pre-recorded presentations played for the online people. Complex, but it's doable. And also we have a silent auction to try to raise more funds for the Cheetah Conservation Fund through our flagship species support program. So please feel free to walk around there and see what you would like to bid on. So let the bidding begin. And just one last thing, Max Birkendorf, he was supposed to present online. However, he will no longer be able to attend today because his post-op situation got a little bit worse. So he sent a message to say, IMZRCB, I'm so sorry. So Max, we hope that you get well soon and hope to meet you one day in person. All right, so we will get started with Dr. Theo Pagel. He will be giving the keynote speech today. He is the director of Cologne Zoo and also the past president of the World Association of Zoos and Aquaria. We are really, really honored to have him here in person because he has an incredibly crazy schedule. So thank you so much for having us. And if you'd like to take the stage.
Thank you. Die Fernbedienung brauche ich wahrscheinlich doch. Ich habe ja eine Präsentation. Sorry for talking in German. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. And yes, I'm happy that at the end I was able to make it to here. I had 2 horrible last weeks, but still survived. I have a presentation. And my topic is the role of zoos in fighting biodiversity loss and promoting conservation. Here we are. Okay, and then we check the technique. It works. So, unbelievable. The UN's landmark biodiversity report 2019 states that 1 million species are at risk of extinction. This is really a threatening loss, and on such a scale, it would be detrimental. Therefore, the UN urged the world to take action. We heard that. We need to take action before it is too late. And that means immediately. Biodiversity is still declining at an unprecedented rate, and the pressures driving this decline are intensifying. You can see here some slides which are not really promising or positive. We, zoos and aquariums, are already fighting this war. And the word war has even at the moment a more worse taste than normally. We scientifically run zoos and aquariums are mainly organized nationally, internationally, that means regionally and on a global level. And as the immediate past president of the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the Global Alliance of Regional Associations, National Federations, Zoos and Aquariums, dedicated to the care and conservation of animals and their habitats around the world, but also as director of Cologne Zoo and working for over 30 years now in this field, I want to speak about the role of zoos in fighting the above-mentioned biodiversity loss and how we as zoos and aquariums are able to promote conservation. So what is WASA? WASA is the global alliance of regional associations, national federations. That means we have institutions, but we have also associations as members. And we are dedicated to the care and conservation of animals and their habitats. That is important. That is a change in the last decades, not only concentrating on animals, but also on their habitats around the world. We have about 300 members worldwide. Normally we say we are the leading zoos, the big players, and with many staff and good budgets. We have also corporate members, and yes, we are the global voice of zoos and aquariums, and we are playing with the global players, and you can see them. So we talk and are highly involved in the IUCN. We talk with the UN, with the CBD, with CITES, and we have memorandums with other organizations like FSC. And hopefully zoos and aquariums are able, and we are willing to connect people with nature. We want to inspire people to protect it and have communities living in harmony with nature. This is the ambitious force that drives us. For this reason, and because the willingness to make a positive impact worldwide. WASA has members all over the world. You can see here over 50 countries, and we are expanding further, step by step. But we only expect the best, the leading zoos filling our high standards. But we need all the others as well. You probably agree that zoos and aquariums have the best opportunity to connect people with nature. In normal years, forget the last 2 ones, more than 700 million people are coming to our institutions. There is no other organization form which has so many visitors than we have. In contrast to visitors of museums or operas, our visitors represent the societies and all their biodiversity. So all colors, all ages. And this is a great opportunity, but never forget, this is also an obligation. For this reason, we need to live the goals of WASA and our WASA World Zoo and Aquarium Strategy. In a perfect world, and that is what I was not able to achieve as president, but I hope that my predecessors will be able. In a perfect world, all progressive, scientifically run zoos would be a part of WASA. There would be only one WASA worldwide, WASA Germany, WASA Europe, which would make us much more stronger than we are already. We need to grow. We need more good zoos and aquariums to become effective partners, active members. We need more organizations around the world to share and use our tools and skills to work on conservation, education, sustainability, and research. And together, reaffirming ourselves as an indisputable major force for the protection of nature and its biodiversity, saving species from extinction. We, WASA, believe in a holistic approach in conservation. That means working together with our members through the many WASA committees to develop resources that can help our members lead the way in the different objectives, such as animal welfare and ethics, conservation, environmental sustainability, education, and more also in research. We heard that already. So in the following presentation, I want to talk with you about how we can and are fighting against biodiversity loss. So I have several chapters: partnering, tools, high standards of animal welfare, visitor education, sustainability, research, conservation. Then I sum up a little and I give hopefully a good view into the future. So let's start with partnering. The question is, how can we effectively fight biodiversity loss and promote conservation? Being aware of the need to unite efforts and the urgency to act, we have already made strategic partners beyond our zoo community, which allow us to maximize our conservation impact and enlarge our areas of influence through them. WASA is the global player working with the ones I have just mentioned, CBD, CITES, and so on. And never forget, and we see that really, I have to see very hardly at the moment, that we are living in a global world. To live in a global world has a lot of pros, but at the moment we see there are a lot of cons. So zoos and aquariums therefore need a global voice that unites us all, and that is the role we play as WASA. But we need to do so also locally, nationally, and regionally. And therefore, many of us are partnering already with local and national authorities, NGOs, with universities, etc. If you want to be an effective and important player in conservation, education, and research, and to make a difference, you, from my point of view, I don't want to be unpolite, but I really urge, if you want to be in the Champions League, in Germany, you have to be a member of WDZ. That is the Verband der Zoologischen Gärten of the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and as well as a member of WASA, because then you have the doors which you can open to get the information you need, and you have the contacts, and you can get the support. Means the WDZ, the German Association of the Scientifically Run Zoos, offers a weekly newsletter, works on the contacts on a national level. They have own working groups, such as for conservation and research, and work closely together with the Stiftung Artenschutz, with the conservation foundation, and they are based in Berlin and the house of the press conference. So we are really there where we can talk to the politicians, to the leaders, to the ones who make the decisions. And the European Association of Zoos and Aquaria offers the necessary tools to manage our populations. You all know the ESBs, the EEPs, the taxon advisory groups. And WASA offers all the other tools and new resources which are constantly made available to the community. We need to see us as a conservation organization, and that usually implies looking beyond our own facilities, identifying areas where we can have a positive impact, and working together to develop resources to help our members get on board and start acting. Just being a member of these professional organizations already gives you the know-how and the contacts you need. And I personally think that we need all the other animal holding facilities, I call them, which are not organized, private organizations, whatever. They are very important, but forgive me, from my definition, they are not the zoos, not a real scientifically run zoo, because they don't fulfill all the work we do in research, in education, and so on. And here you see the partners you can have, and there is also the IMZRCB. We have heard about that already. There are other zoo organizations of smaller and wildlife parks here in Germany. So there are people you can connect with. And what about the tools? Oops. On screen, you can see our strategies. These are the strategies of WASA, and they are not used only by WASA members, meanwhile, but they are used by a lot of and many other zoos worldwide. WASA is something like a think tank. For decades, we involve the big strategies, the conservation strategy. We have now other strategies like the caring for wildlife, an animal welfare strategy, how we should care and handle our animals in our facilities. And we even have ended up with sustainable certified palm oil and reducing measures and of offsetting carbon. So we have many, many practical strategies which you can use. And we identify areas through which our conservation impact can be maximized, looking beyond our own facilities again. Progressive zoos and aquariums are key players in conservation. We are already a key player. I think it's over 400 million US dollar we all give yearly to in-situ projects. But what are the elements that guide us? Our ultimate goal is wildlife conservation, but this cannot be achieved without having the highest standards of animal welfare. Having the animals we care for thriving under our care. Visitor education is equally important. A visit to a zoo or aquarium needs to have a lifelong effect, needs to promote a behavior change that ignites people to take action and start protecting nature and its biodiversity. And to do so, even sustainability has to be in our DNA. Zoos and aquariums are also paving the way for a more sustainable future in which animals, people, and the health of the planet can thrive. This point becomes more and more important. Finally, progressive zoos and aquariums are science-based organizations. Training and research are carried out on a daily basis within many of our facilities. These are essential to help us further understand the species we care for and help us protect their animals' counterparts in the wild. Luckily, meanwhile, these roles are not only recognized by those of us who belong to the zoo and aquarium community, but also by other external organizations and conventions, such as the Species Survival Commission of the IUCN and many others. WADA believes in a holistic approach to conservation. I say it again, we need to work together with our colleagues and members through the many WADA committees to develop resources that can help our members lead the way in different areas that impact conservation and so on. And we need high standards of animal welfare. We have not only to assure that the animals we keep stay alive. That's not enough. No, we have to ensure that the animals we care are thriving under our care, really thriving. And we have to get people excited about the animals in our care. We just saw the film of your park here, and of course, you saw the smiles on the face of the visitors. So that is exactly what we need to get them thinking and changing their own behavior. We need to make sure that they get the best care we are able to offer. That means not only the guests, but also our animals. And without high standards of animal welfare, all other goals, totally all other goals will fail. If you have a poor exhibit with not thriving animals, you will not reach people. And lastly, with best practice, attractive enclosures, enriched, happy and healthy animals, we can reach out on a very emotional level to our visitors. And besides their acceptance, get them really interested in animals and nature conservation. In many German zoos, luckily we have only professionals working. That is not only the staff of biologists and veterinarians, but zoo animal keeper here in Germany is a real profession. You go 3 years to school. So I can say in my zoo, I have only professionals working. They exactly know what they do. And that helps sometimes if you have to discuss with animal rights people. But honestly, in many other countries, that is not the case. And that is something we need to change. We need more professionals, more people who are really covered with the necessary knowledge, who are able to fulfill our high standards. That is what we need to change globally. And visitor education. As mentioned already above, a visit to a zoo or aquarium needs to have a lifelong effect, needs to promote a behavior change that ignites people to take action and start protecting nature and its biodiversity. And I do not want to get too much into detail, as you may know them already, but just remember that visitor education has two variations, that is the formal and the informal one. Informal learning refers to our signs and sheets. Formal learning takes place from the kindergarten via schools up to the universities and even adult education programs, which many of us are running. We need to get the message to the people. We need to sensitize them and interest them in nature. And at the end, they may change their own attitudes. And more we have scientific papers which really show that that is working. Because many critical organizations say, forget about all what you are doing. No, we are able now to prove we can reach, we can influence people to the better. And you know, that is exactly why I'm working in the zoo. If you see these faces, and the younger the people are, the easier you can connect them with even ugly or whatever called animals. So sustainability, yeah, as I said, it has to be in our DNA. We need to walk the talk. In general, we have to pave the way for a more sustainable future in which animals, people, and health of the planet can thrive. And therefore, we need to live by example. My own zoo is momentarily working on an own sustainability strategy because we want to live what we pray. And I can tell you that it's not an easy way, but because of the world situation, many of us will be forced to go a much more sustainable way than we did in the past. If you want to get more details, I just refer to the WASA sustainability strategy, which we have recently published as well. Research. It should be clear and normal that as science-based organizations, training and research are carried out daily within our facilities. These are essential to help us further understand the species we care for and protect their animal counterparts in the wild. In our institutions, we are learning every day. My zoo is the third oldest in Germany, and luckily we are not looking like that anymore. So we have made progress in 162 years almost. We are active in different research areas. Obvious to the most are ethology, physiology, and veterinary medical studies. But more and more, we are also active in other fields. The team of my curator, Professor Ziegler, for example, has described more than 120 new amphibian and reptile species in Vietnam and Laos. And we help to list species even on CITES and or red lists by working in the field. We support reintroductions, sponsor radio collars, find new habitats for reintroduction. We carry out pre- and post-monitoring programs for released animals. Research of zoos and aquariums is not bounded on the ground and includes, beside biology, conservation, etc., also more and more social studies. Conservation. The classical species conservation of zoos and aquariums consisted out of two parts. In the past, species conservation in situ, that means on site, but recognize that it cannot function without comprehensive nature conservation. Only if there are suitable habitats, we will be able to conserve species. This can be achieved by, among other things, bans on removal from the wild and or protecting of habitats and or reintroductions. And secondly, species conservation ex situ means species conservation through breeding, for example, in our institutions, the zoos and aquariums of our zoo associations. The classical boundaries between in situ and ex situ conservation are becoming increasingly blurred. More and more zoological gardens are cooperating with species conservation associations, such as the World Wildlife Fund, or here in Germany, Naturschutzbund Deutschland. So do we in Cologne, we have, we were the first zoo in Germany cooperating with the WWF, we created a Team Tiger. We raised a lot of money for tigers in the wild, but a certain amount of this was invested for the tigers in our zoo. And we have just 2 years ago totally renovated the tiger exhibit. Or we are working with the NABU, the local NABU organization in Cologne, for the support of the green toad. And not to forget our work and engagement in other natural habitats or fundraising. Some zoos, like us, do the latter by charging a species protection euro or nature conservation euro in addition to the admission price. That is a key for many of us now to really assure that there is money for conservation, even in difficult years like the 2 last ones. And the fields in which we operate have become even more diverse. As early as 1985, the so-called European Conservation Breeding Programs of the EASA were founded in Cologne. Today, we speak of the so-called EASA ex-situ programs. Today, these are within the framework of regional collection plans and long-term management plans. When I started, it was just about the animal, just about the species. Now we have really a long focus, a really long-term management. In situ and ex situ experts jointly decide what is needed to conserve a species. And in doing so, they consider the status of in situ and ex situ populations, as well as potential roles for ex situ management in conserving the species. The European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, Aquaria, there's a difference between WASA, of which almost all VDZ zoos are members, currently runs more than 400 conservation breeding programs. Globally, probably 1,000 different programs are existing. These programs ensure that the gene variability remains as large as possible and that the species is preserved through complex population management. In each case, a coordinator from an EASA zoo, with the help of a species commission, takes on this responsibility and important task. Those kinds of regional breeding programs also exist in other regions, you know that, like in the United States. And of course, we have the global species management programs, and I think they become more and more important in the future. We really have to work globally. And in nature and species conservation, and that is the reason why I say that GSMPs are becoming more important, we are increasingly talking about the so-called one plan approach. In Germany, it's nice to say it's OPA, 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 grandfather. This means that we will only be able to ensure the conservation of a large number of species if the most diverse fields work together. All those involved with such a species, whether they are private owners, whether they are zoological gardens or national parks or museums, they must cooperate if we want to be able to save the species. OPA is based on integrated conservation planning for species within or outside its natural range and under all management conditions, involving all responsible parties and available resources to create a comprehensive species conservation plan. Global management, as we already know from the International Slug Books of the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, will take on greater importance. Here, the Conservation Planning Specialist Group, CPSG, of the International Conservation Union for Nature and Natural Resources, IUCN, plays a very, very important linking role. So what are we doing in Cologne? Well, we invest about 250,000 euros each year in our in situ projects. For example, we have been involved in Vietnam since 1999, together with the Institute of Ecology and Biological Resources in Hanoi. We have, among other things, built up a Melin station for biodiversity. It serves as a breeding station for endangered species, the psychedelic gecko and the crocodile-tailed lizard. these are the ones we are keeping there. And in addition, confiscated animals ranging from amphibians to turtles are cared for and prepared for introduction. And at the same time, the station is important for the environmental education of the local population and serves as well as a base for researchers. The Stiftung Artenschutz Species Conservation Foundation of the VDZ organization is also a partner where you can, as a small zoo, go to and just give money, and so you will be also able to support conservation in situ. Other zoos have their own organizations. Just think about the Wildlife Conservation Society, WCS, by the former New York Zoo, and now it's more or less the WCS is the big player, and the zoos of New York are only the basis. Think about the WWF, and you are able also to work with the ZJAP, means Stiftung Artenschutz, oder die Zoologische Gesellschaft für Arten- und Populationsschutz. So let me sum up. During the last years, we were quite successful in promoting our work. Luckily, meanwhile, the roles mentioned above are not only recognized by us, but also by others. And one good example are the IUCN SSC guidelines on the use of ex-situ management for species conservation from 2014. They outline a set of 9 potential roles that an ex-situ program might serve for the conservation of a species. That is democratic manipulation, education and awareness programs, insurance population, long-term ex-situ population, etc., etc. So there are a lot of good reasons to do that. And additionally, the roles of modern zoos and aquariums are meanwhile fixed in several laws and other legal frameworks as well. It would be helpful and good if that would, such as the EU Zoo Directive from 1999, be done around the world in the law systems we have there. Unfortunately, is at the moment only in Europe. Interestingly, there, the goals are used in the EU directive that we have fixed ourselves already in 1993, means in our WASA, World Zoo and Aquarium Conservation Strategy. And another example I want to mention is Article 9 of the Convention on Biological Diversity. It also recognizes the role of zoos and aquariums as organizations dedicated to ex-situ conservation. And this highlights the importance of ex-situ conservation as complementary to in-situ conservation. It says that we should adopt measures for the ex-situ conservation of components of biological diversity, establish and maintain facilities for ex-situ conservation of and research on plants, animals, and microorganisms. And now a look into the future. I was too fast here. Zoos and aquariums can, will, and are supporting and delivering on the post-2020 biodiversity framework and milestones of the CBD's global biodiversity framework. 21 targets and 10 milestones have been proposed for 2030. Some of them are particularly relevant to us, to zoos and aquariums. As an example, I just like to mention the 2030 Action Target 4. It says that we need to ensure active management actions to enable the recovery and conservation of species and the genetic diversity of wild and domesticated species, including through ex-situ conservation, and effectively manage human-wildlife interactions to avoid or reduce human-wildlife conflicts. And she, Elizabeth here, Maruma Mrema, from the Executive Secretary of the CBD, she said that we are important. You can read that. She said that talking at one of our conferences, and that was really a very great moment for all of us to hear that also from her side. The future, and now I come to the future, is reverse the red. I don't know whether you have heard about that. It is a solution to the problem. We are aware that we do not link efforts nor engage all stakeholders and responsible parties enough. Yes, we already have strong tools and fragmented success stories, but we need to harmonize, coordinate, and integrate. We need and will improve cooperation and coordination between all stakeholders. And now I show you a short film.
Every year, thousands of experts evaluate the status of animal, plant, algae, and fungi species around the world. Using a common language of assessment, they categorize each species' risk of extinction on the IUCN Red List. The Red List provides a barometer of life. And every year, the outlook gets worse. More than 31,000 species are currently threatened with extinction. Most because of human action. But human action can also reverse the Red List trend. So conservationists, governments, and communities around the world are joining forces, activating tried and tested IUCN tools in a coordinated effort to assess, plan, and act for wildlife. Together, we can save species from extinction. Together, we can win the fight for our planet's future. Together, we can reverse the red.
We can. So that is exactly, Reverse the Red is an initiative of the IUCN Species Survival Commission and WASA, a platform to unify efforts to quantify achievements and conservation investment and harmonize actions. Reverse the Red shall have even become a global movement that ignites strategic cooperation and action to ensure the survival of wild species and ecosystems. Reverse the Red embraces the species conservation cycle, and that is exactly what we want to do. So we need to assess, and we should plan, and then we should act. That is, you know, before you talk, think. Easy. Assess, monitoring species, and informing the world about the status and trends of biodiversity. Then we need to plan, enhance collaborative, inclusive, and I see other pictures like you, inclusive and science-based strategies, including policy change to ensure the most effective species conservation and action. And then we want to act to improve the status of biodiversity by connecting, convening, and mobilizing actions involving governments, academia, civil society, and private sector. Reverse the Red will be able to create missing tools, including access to training and methodologies which allow easier cooperation, and Reverse the Red is active on building capacity, such as national red listing. So we are building up so-called species survival centers where we will assess, where we will build up the, let's say, data on which we later on can work. And what have we done so far? So IUCN and WASA have created this idea of Reverse the Red. We had a rollout, that means on the World Conservation Congress of IUCN in Marseille last year, we were there with a pavilion. We raised our flag for the very first time as zoos and aquariums in the conservation world. And we started this idea, to publish this idea. And now we are on the way to create a social movement. That means it's not a campaign. What we want to achieve is a movement like you know it from Greta. Because what she was able to do is that everyone on the planet is aware of climate change. And that is exactly what we want. We want that people know there is an immense biodiversity loss. We need biodiversity to survive. And that is exactly what we will try to start during this year. And maybe in 2024 or even later, at the end, we want to have a congress, a species congress, which is discussed by IUCN now for years. It never took place. It should focus on species, and we hope that when we will have this congress, we really can look back and said, look, we have reversed the red for that number of species. And that is what we are looking for. And yeah, I hope that I could raise a little bit about what we as zoos and aquariums are already doing, what we want to do in the future. And I'm totally convinced about this movement, and I'm totally convinced about the one plan approach. And therefore, it is good that we have meetings and conferences like this, where we can bring together people from different backgrounds. And because only together we will be able to reverse the red. And with that, I close, and I thank you for your attention. What I have to say is that I have to leave. Fabrizio already said I have a quite full schedule. I have to go to a WASA and EASA directors meeting tomorrow. So I will leave at noon. So if you want to talk with me, reach out before I have to leave. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll do it. I'll take it with me. Thank you very much.
Well, does anyone have any questions for Prof. Pagel, or would you like to approach him personally before noon? Do we have any online questions? No? Okay, so if you have any questions, please see him before he leaves today. But thank you so much, Prof. Pagel. All right, so we will move on to the next topic. Matthias Kleespies was supposed to be here today, but he fell ill, so he wanted to share his talk anyway, and he is online in case of questions. We will play his pre-recorded presentation, and of course, if you have any questions, please feel free, and then he can answer your questions for you. Are we ready?
Hello, my name is Matthias Kleespies from the Goethe University in Frankfurt, and today I want to present you some of our research results in the field of visitor studies in the zoo. I was actually planning to give my presentation in person today, but unfortunately tested positive for COVID like 3 days ago. So I switched to this digital presentation, and I hope I can still give you some insights into our research. Okay, let's get started with the presentation. In our modern times, we are facing environmental problems that are larger than ever before. Climate change, loss of global biodiversity, habitat destruction, or environmental pollution are probably some of the most prominent examples. One way to challenge these environmental problems is environmental education. And in this context, zoos play a very important role. In the last decade, they have more and more transformed into environmental education centers. Zoos see environmental education or conservation education as their most important objective. What you see here is the analysis of 137 zoo mission statements from zoos in America. Okay, it's maybe a bit outdated from 2007, but it is probably still pretty similar today. And what you can see here is that conservation education is considered to be the most important factor, the most important goal of zoos. The aim of environmental education programs usually is to change people's behavior. The idea is that after somebody participated, for example in a guided tour or another environmental education program, that the person changes their behavior in a more environmentally friendly way. But how can we reach this goal? In the 60s and 70s it was pretty easy. It was thought that like giving the people knowledge changed their behavior. And why this is not totally wrong and knowledge is an important factor, we know today is not work like this. Because probably everybody can tell from own experience. Yeah, I know, for example, I should go by bicycle to work, but it's pretty cold outside and I have to get up a bit earlier, so maybe today I take the car. And even I have the knowledge that it would be better to take the bicycle, I still gonna take the car because it's more convenient. So knowledge alone is not enough. So in the last decades other constructs gained more and more attention. One of these is the change in environmental attitudes and the other one is connection to nature. And in our research we especially focus on the change in attitudes and on connection to nature. In this context, our department published in the last year 3 research papers in different scientific journals, and I think we hear a presentation later about the Journal of Zoological and Botanical Gardens here. 2 of our research papers focusing on connection to nature, the third one on the change in attitudes. Before I present you the results of the different research papers, I want to give you a small introduction to connection to nature because it plays an important role in our research. Connection to nature is defined as the extent to which an individual includes nature within his or herself. Pretty straightforward definition, but why is connection to nature so important? People connected to nature are more motivated to protect nature and show more environmentally friendly behavior. But also on a personal health level, an increased connection to nature shows its benefits. It leads to a better life with greater happiness and well-being. Okay, when connection to nature is so important, what are the factors influencing or increasing connection to nature? The most important factor is the time spent in nature. The question that arises here, of course, is a zoo nature? And I would in this case argue, of course. Even if it is most of the time somehow man-made, you can still say is nature. As well as a park, for example, can be considered nature as well. The other point is environmental education. So both topics that are good for connection to nature can be provided by the zoo. Even I have to say that the time spent is like the most important one. But when you combine both time spent in nature with environmental education, you can reach very good results too. Now, after we know what connection to nature is and why it is important, the question is there an easy way to measure connection to nature? And yes, there is. The inclusion of nature in self-scale by Schulz. It is just a single question consisting of 7 circle pairs, you can see here. The circles are labeled with me and nature, and the question is, how connected do you feel with nature? Please choose a picture which best describes your relationship with nature. Maybe you can do it like for yourself now. I was pretty skeptical when I first saw this scale, but the literature is pretty clear. This scale seems to be pretty valid, so it's pretty easy to use and it's pretty accurate. Just for clarification for the rest of the presentation, when I talk about people with low connection to nature, I talk about people who choose these circle pairs. When I talk about people with medium connection to nature, I talk about people choosing the middle pair. And of course, when I talk about high connection to nature, I mean the people choosing one of these 3 circle pairs. Now finally we can come to our research. Our research question was if a guided zoo tour can increase connection to nature of high school students. First of all, why did we choose high school students? There are two main reasons. First of all, from all students you could choose, high school students have the lowest connection to nature. In puberty, there is a high decrease in connection to nature. So we thought maybe these students most benefited from a guided zoo tour. The second reason is that also in this age group, students are less interested in topics concerning zoos and concerning animals compared to, for example, younger students. So that's why we choose high school students. So what did we do? We offered guided zoo tours at the Opel Zoo in Kronberg, our corporation zoo. Before the tour started, we measured, of course, connection to nature using our circles. We could have measured connection to nature with the circles again after the tour, and then that's it, just see is there an increase or not. But we wanted to know if small additions like 10 to 15 minutes long could have a positive or maybe negative effect to our results. So besides the control group that just got the guided tour, 1 hour, we had small add-ons. One of these add-ons was feeding meerkats, another one was feeding and touching the giraffes, another one was a keeper talk with the keeper of the elephant enclosure, then a small view behind the scenes where the students could look behind the scenes where the normal zoo visitor cannot go, and a visit in the petting zoo where they can feed and touch the goats. After all of that, we measured connection to nature again. Okay, let's jump to our results. What you can here see is the results of the different setups, before, after, before, after, and so on. And you see down here the low connection to nature, medium connection to nature, and high connection to nature. So let's look a bit at the results. First of all, we see that the students with low connection to nature show an increase in all setups. That's a very good result because it shows that even a very, very simple, maybe the most simple environmental education program you can think about, has a positive effect, especially on people who are not connected to nature. Really good result. It showed that it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you do something, it helps. On the other side, people who already come with a high connection to nature show no increase in any of our research setups. This shows that the 1 hour guided tour is not enough to increase this already very connected people to nature. Okay, so the most interesting differences between the groups you can find in the middle group. We can see here in the control group that just got a guided tour, we see a small increase. In the tour with feeding meerkats, we see no increase. That suggests that the feeding of the meerkats had a negative effect. On the other hand, we see that the giraffe feeding had a very, very, very high effect compared to the other ones. Our data cannot tell why these effects come, but we can have a guess. So let's have a guess. Giraffes are one of the most popular zoo animals. There's research that shows that most people spend more time in front of the giraffe enclosure compared to other animals. And when you ask people before they visit a zoo, especially children, which animal they want to see, most of the time giraffe is under the top 3 answers. So feeding giraffes is a very extraordinary experience. You have direct contact to these very, very popular animals. You can touch it, it takes the food very gentle out of your hand. That is just a very, very special experience. So this might have led to an increase in connection to nature, especially in the medium group. Feeding meerkats is a bit different. Yeah, meerkats are very, very cute and a very, very popular zoo animal too. And I myself really enjoy feeding the meerkats. But the students had most of the time a problem with the living mealworms we feeding the meerkats with. Some students showed a lot of disgust for the worms. Others had ethical concerns like giving a living animal as food. So let's say only around 50% of the students wanted to feed the meerkats. Furthermore, you cannot touch the meerkats like you do, for example, with the giraffes earlier. Meerkats will probably bite you. So the students just threw the mealworms in the enclosure and this is it. This was maybe disappointing for some students. So maybe this could be some reasons that students like with medium connection to nature had like a negative effect. Maybe there are other reasons as well. Okay, now we saw the results for like high school students that like come to the zoo because like basically their teacher decided we have like a out of school trip to the zoo. Now we did the same research with adults who voluntarily registered online for like a guided zoo tour. And we have 3 setups here, like the standard zoo tour with no add-ons, like special topic zoo tours where like, for example, like special educators come and like educate one topic, and the tour with additional feedings. And what you can see here at first is that like the group with like no connection to nature is very small. Like people who voluntarily register in a guided tour have like normally higher connection to nature. What you also can see that we have a small increase in the people with already very high connection to nature, where it's a positive result, because we can see that even in this group, this small tour has a positive influence. And again, we see that the small add-ons here, for example, the special topics and the feeding, might have an additional positive effect in the medium group. Okay, let's jump to attitudes now. We did another research on environmental attitudes where we surveyed more than 3,000 people in 7 different countries. We were supported from 10 different EASA members. They asked people as well as in the zoo as well as outside, so we can compare visitors with non-visitors. And we investigated 7 influencing factors and attitudes towards species conservation. So, first of all, a big thank you to the zoos who supported us. Like, they collected the data basically for us, and without their help our research would not be possible, and the results you see in a few seconds would not have been possible too. So, the influence of which factors on attitudes towards species conservation we did investigate. First of all, gender, age, the frequency of zoo visits, like how many times a person visited the zoo in the last 12 months. Let's note here, this data is from before Corona. Perception of zoos, like people liking the zoo or like saying we don't need zoos in our modern time. Interest in animals, and of course the country that was surveyed in. I can give you a few seconds here, so you can think yourself what you would guess which factors have an influence on the attitudes towards species conservation. And it's almost all except gender. So it doesn't matter if somebody is male, female or diverse, it has no influence on their attitudes towards species conservation. Every other factor has an influence. And I used a bit of an unscientific way to quantify this now, but it's easier for this presentation, so I make it with like pluses to quantify how big these effects are. And you can see here that age, the frequency of zoo visits and the perception of zoos have only like a small effect. The country has like a medium effect, and a very big effect have the interest in animals. Because in our research we're especially interested in the influence of zoo visits, we did additional analysis, so-called mediator analysis. So what did we do? This, what you see here, the frequency of zoo visits had a direct effect on attitudes towards species conservation that is very small. That we know before from the image before. The interest in animals we know too is like a large effect. What we wanted to know now, how big is the effect from the zoo visits, and then the effect from interest, like this indirect effect, the frequency of zoo visits has on interest, and then again on attitudes. And with the mediator analysis we could really calculate this, and we found out frequency of zoo visit has like a medium effect on interest in animals, what is a good result in itself, I have to say. Like increasing interest in animals is like a good thing, so a good result in itself, but we can also calculate this, like frequency of zoo visits has like a small indirect effect over this like red line is drawn here. So overall, the combining direct and indirect effect, it is shown that like the total effect like is in a medium range. So the frequency of zoo visits has like a bit of a larger effect than it first appeared. So this is our results from earlier, so I can show this again with like the mediator analysis. I have shown you like a lot of research we did like in the last few years, but we're also working on like new projects at the moment, and I can just suggest, if you're really interested in our research and maybe want to support us with our research, you saw like we had like 10 zoos who helped us with this one big international research, and we're working on more like this. So if you're interested in maybe participating within something like this, I suggest my coworker Victoria is today here making a poster presentation, and she can give you a lot of insights on our new research projects. And yeah, just come to her, like maybe talk to her, and she really can like explain what's coming next. Before I come to the end of my presentation, let me give you a small summary about the results. Even a short environmental education program like a guided tour is an opportunity to increase connection to nature of the participants. Especially people with low initial connection to nature profit from such programs. Small additions to the tour, for example like feeding giraffes, might have additional influence. People more often visiting a zoo showing stronger positive attitudes towards species conservation. Even there is some research done, further research is still necessary. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your audience, and if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask me, to write me an email, or like I said, ask my coworker Victoria later at the poster presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions for Matthias Kleespies? So like he says, if you do, please communicate with his colleague Victoria Foyt. There she is in the back. Okay, so with that, we will continue on. Oh, thank you so very much, Matthias. I hope you feel better soon as well, and hope to see you in person eventually in the future. So we continue on with the next presentation. This is with Sally Binding. She is of the EAZA, the European Association of Zoos and Aquaria, and she's the Animal Welfare Coordinator. So we welcome you, and we look forward to your incredible talk and for your workshop later on in the afternoon. All right.
Get my timer going. Promise I'm going to try my hardest. Thank you. And you just so you don't need to apologise to British people about snow. Yeah. So there's two things you wake a British person for: a member of the royal family has died, or it is snowing. This is very exciting for us. So I am obviously British. I have quite a strong British accent, and I do talk quite fast. So if I see any little hands, please just give me the nudge to slow it right down again, because I tend to speed up as I go through. I start with the best intentions and then it all goes very horribly wrong. So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting us and welcoming us here today to your beautiful park. My name is Sally Binding. I work for the European Association of Zoos and Aquaria that Theo very kindly gave an introduction to during his presentation. And today I'm going to be talking to you about what's in it for me, exploring the impact of visitor-animal interactions on the welfare of animals. Kicker. Am I pointing this up there, into there? No, but there's every chance.
Maybe I'll switch it off.
Ah, yeah. It's me and technology. I panic. There we go. So the first thing to highlight is the huge diversity that we have with regards to visitor-animal interactions in zoos, or VAIs. So they go from everything from very direct contact with animals, as Matthias touched upon in his talk, with, for example, feeding experiences, petting, riding on animals, etc., to very indirect experiences such as drive-throughs and merely just the presence of visitors at a zoo, our scent, our sound, just be it, and our noise being present around animals. So there is huge diversity within the field of VAIs. And this study here by De Cruz, they looked at, it was 1,241 zoos, the websites, and they were all either WASA member zoos, or they were members of a regional or a national association that they themselves were part of WASA. And they looked at the VAIs that were advertised as part of that zoo. And what they found was that 75% of all the zoos were advertising some form of VAIs. And as you can see, petting here coming up the most advertised. And this doesn't even include just the presence of visitors around the zoos. As I said, the noise, the scents, and the sight of visitors. And to give you a little bit of perspective of the amount of research that we have in the field at the moment concerning VAIs, this study looked at animal welfare-based publications in 7 major journals between 2008 and 2017. And then it categorised all those different welfare publications based on their themes. So as you can see here, visitor activity present is relatively high amongst the literature in representation. And we also have down the end here our education animals. So you can put that into that group as well. So there is a relatively high amount of research, but when you consider actually the amount of VAIs that are happening every single day in our zoos, there is always, as everything, huge scope for more research. And when we think about the tides of change of how we consider VAIs, many years ago, it was all about the visitor. How can we provide the visitor with the best experience? And many years ago, it would be the ride-ons and the handling and getting the visitors as close as they can to the animal with no regard to the animal welfare. Thankfully, things have changed quite rapidly, and now there is far more consideration of the conservation education benefit, as Matthias touched on again, looking at the benefit of those interactions to educate with education. And there's a lot of research going on into the welfare of the animals concerned with these VAIs, and does it have a positive, a neutral, or a negative impact on these animals? So here we have from Jeff Hosey, who's one of the leading figures in research with regards to visitor-animal interactions, and he proposes the visitor effect, which he suggests to be a change in animal behaviour resulting from visitors. So from this, he leaves it very open. He doesn't cast any aspersions on whether these would be negative impacts, which is quite often the way we would suggest. But he leaves it open, so we could have positive impacts, neutral impacts, or negative impacts on our animals. And there's definitely a lot of literature out there. It's building all the time. And there's a diversity in that literature. So we have the good welfare ones, the bad welfare ones, and the neutral welfare ones. So here's just some examples of studies to show you the diversity. So Indian Gaur were found to have increased aggression associated with high visitor numbers, suggestive of a negative welfare state. Giraffes that were involved in hand feeding experiences with members of the public, those that were involved in that process showed lower oral stereotypies than those that weren't. Crowned lemur, whether they were fed by a familiar keeper or an unfamiliar member of the public, showed no obvious change in behaviour. And the ring-tailed lemurs, the study showed that during visitor interaction experiences with walkthrough and feeding, they showed increased curiosity and locomotion, suggestive of positive welfare, but conversely, as you would expect with any sort of concentration of feeding, increased aggression within the group. So certainly just from these 4 studies, you can see that there is a huge diversity out there with regards to animal welfare in VAI experiences. And when we look at the range of conditions that we have as well surrounding these, so the setting, is this inside or outside the enclosure, for example, the animal involved, and Jeff Hosey has been very vocal in his literature in stating that the animal should never be seen as a 2D entity. It's very much a condition that contains lots of variables within it. Based on ecology, personality, previous experience, etc., life stage, sex, the dynamics of the social group. So measuring just against one animal does not represent the whole group. The visitor, how does the visitor approach this? What's their behaviour? The choice and control that the animal has, and it's well documented in the literature, as you will probably all know, that imparting choice and control to our animals, appropriate choice and control, can have a huge impact on their welfare. I would like to state here, though, that it's important that we don't say maximum choice and control or infinite choice and control, because there is a threshold to where appropriate choice and control can pass, where it actually becomes negative for the animals. However, I would say within the realms of VAI, we still have a lot of progress we can make with choice. The type of interaction, these animals being touched or not, and do they choose to be touched? Can they volunteer themselves for this experience without a huge weight of decision? The housing and husbandry, are they housed differently? Are they treated differently? Professor Vicky Melfi, again, a primary researcher in VAI, she promoted recently in one of our EASA welfare webinars. She talked about some studies that they'd done at Taronga Zoo with the red-tailed black cockatoos that were involved in the free flight experience. And what they found is that those cockatoos that were in the free flight experience showed higher levels of abnormal behaviour outside of that show. And when they discussed it, they realised that actually those involved in the show received roughly 90–95% of their diet as part of the show, in contrast to the other cockatoos where their food was enriched throughout the day in appropriate ways throughout their enclosure or their aviary. So then a later study that they looked at promoting enriching and foraging behaviours with those birds that were used in the display, and it showed a significant drop in their abnormal behaviours. So are those considerations taken into account with our VAI animals? And the surrounding impact. So for example, are you removing animals from a social group? Do they go back to that social group? What is the impact on there? Are they allowed to breed, raise young, etc.? Do all of those other things just because they are involved in VAI experiences? And there's no significance to that box being, doesn't show up so much there, but that box is quite more yellow than, or circle, quite more yellow than the others. And there's only so long you can spend changing a colour in a PDF before it really becomes very, very frustrating. So I would like to argue, when we look at VAIs, who is it that we put into the mainframe? Historically, we've always focused on the human. What does the visitor want? What should we be providing? What's this experience we would like the visitors to have? And then we tend to take the approach of we build the welfare and the needs of the animal around the visitor's experience. However, I would like to argue that we should do it this way round instead. If we put our animals in the mainframe, we decide what we would like, opportunities with regards to welfare we would like to give them, what is positive welfare for them, and take the VAI as an opportunity to promote positive welfare, and then we build the visitor experience around that. And that's certainly not to say that I am undervaluing or disregarding the importance of visitors in our zoos. They are obviously of absolute pivotal importance to the lifeblood of zoos. However, there are studies coming out that's showing that visitors are increasingly aware of welfare of animals in zoos. They are increasingly critical, and they have actually a really good understanding of welfare in many cases within zoos and animals. So if we form it like this, with animals in the mainframe, putting their welfare first, we can still provide really positive animal welfare experiences. And always approaching with the idea of thinking, what is in it for the animals? How do they benefit from this experience, and what can we provide to them? And interestingly, when I was doing the research for this talk, I was reading one of the reviews on VAIs, and throughout the really large review, it was promoting throughout the fact that VAIs can be positive with regards to welfare, neutral, negative, and we shouldn't cast aspersions, and those kind of very sort of setting the tone. However, the final title in the last subheading was this, which I felt completely counteracted the whole argument of his review. And it's, can visitor effects be decreased? Which is a very loaded statement. It automatically suggests that there is a negative welfare effect on the animals due to VAIs. And certainly the literature is showing that most, in a general term, most VAIs are coming back with negative welfare impacts on animals. However, Vicky Melfi argues that how biased is this literature? Are we publishing the studies that show there's no impact on animal welfare? The animals don't change at all during this experience, and she argues that, and even like positive welfare, she argues whether this literature is actually getting published, because is it interesting, deemed to be interesting enough to actually make it into the journals? She argues that it should be, but she questions whether that is the case. So how about if this is the way that we view VAIs in the future? Instead of asking, can visitor effects be decreased, should we be asking, can visitor effects actually be increased? And there will always be those scenarios that that just do not fit a positive animal welfare scenario. Absolutely. So it is a flippant comment, but what if this is the way that we approach VAIs? We approach them as an opportunity for the animal to promote positive animal welfare, and then how can we frame the visitor experience around that for conservation, education, immersive experience and engaging experiences for the visitor? So there should be a video coming up next. Yes. So there are some leading zoos within this field. I'm going to point out now, please notice that the guinea pigs get rewarded whether they are in the crate or they are not going in the crate. So the decision to participate in this VAI experience is not loaded with the very heavily weighted choice of get fed or don't get fed, which suggests there is some other intrinsic reward for actually taking part in this process. So this brilliant video is from Annette Pedersen, who is sat over there, and I know she's going to touch upon it later as well. And this is Copenhagen Zoo, which is the leading zoo in promoting positive animal welfare during VAIs and during training purposes. So you can see that at no point was that animal grabbed. And if you look at these down the side, it's unsurprising that animals do not like to get grabbed. A claw, a talon, a hand round their waist. And it's very easy to override an animal's choice and control because we can do. You would never walk into a tiger enclosure and just grab them and move them because you can. You just wouldn't do it. But sometimes for some of these smaller animals, it's so easy to think, oh, 10 seconds, pick them up, done. I'll chase them around, done. Okay, but if you looked at the animals during this, they had ultimate choice and control of whether they went in. And their behavior when they were with the children was relaxed. They were eating their food instead of, as you see often, these animals, they're frozen in space. This video here is for the wonderful Jim Mackey at Zoological Society of London. And both Jim and Annette are members, and Annette is chair of the IARSA Animal Training Working Group. So here again, the same principle, building the VAI around the experience of the animal and using it as a positive welfare experience. These animals aren't being forced, they're not being coerced, they ultimately choose whether they partake in this. The visitors are brought to the bird area, so there is no need to crate them, and it is all built around the bird area. And here, for those animals that do need to be moved, they choose to go onto these platforms. So at no point are we having to handle these animals unnecessarily, and it's entirely voluntary. And using VARs as an opportunity for those animals to perform their natural behavioural repertoire for positive welfare. So here the coatis again, full choice and control goes to them for them engage in these arboreal experiences. And when he gets to the visitors, there you go. I think it's a fair assumption that with all those heads turning, those visitors are certainly engaged in this experience. But it is most definitely built around the animals in the main frame. The tiger demonstration or educational demonstration within ZSL again. Big thanks to Jim Mackey for this video. And in a minute, it'll scan up and you'll see the number of visitors there on the other side of the glass. But these visitor talks and education sessions are used as an opportunity to demonstrate the tiger's natural behavioural repertoire. So they can see the skills and the adaptations that are being talked about during the educational session. And I do stress these don't happen just during the educational sessions. These are built in to the day's programme with the animal. You can see the huge number of people back there. Annette Pedersen again at Copenhagen Zoo. And please notice that these animals get treated and rewarded whether they choose to come in or not. They're not being coerced. The weight of the decision is not loaded. So again, it's practicing hands-off experiences for the animals, with the animals in the mainframe, but also providing a really positive experience for the visitors. In this case, we have the zoo staff. At any point, this animal can just walk away. And it's really easy to provide these opportunities for animals where their welfare is centred. These guys can come out as they choose. So easy just to grab a tortoise and move it, isn't it? And we all do it. And yeah, just thinking about the animal, giving them choice and control to participate or not. So in conclusion, VAIs cover a huge spectrum of different scenarios, conditions and variables within those conditions that all need to be considered on a case-by-case basis. Evidence of VAIs is increasing, and although currently most are indicative that they have a negative welfare impact on animals, it's arguable whether the published literature is representative of the true picture. But putting animal welfare in the mainframe and building VAIs around this gives us the opportunity to promote positive animal welfare along with a really positive VAI experience. And we should always be asking, in everything we do with our animals, we should be thinking from their perspective of what's in it for them. Thank you very much.
While you think about your questions, we also have a gift for you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Would anyone have any questions for Sally Binding in the meantime? Or do we have any online questions? I have one question. Go ahead.
Thanks for the talk, Sally. I have a question about the VEIs. Do we know something about the attitudes of visitors depending on whether you have to pay for them extra or not?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know. I feel that might be a Matthias question. I haven't come across anything in my reading as to whether financially it has an impact.
I'm always wondering whether this means people can get the idea they can buy animal contact, which to me would be the opposite of respect. But that's not part of what you surveyed, the literature. It's nothing that I came across. I wasn't specifically searching for that. It would be really interesting, and I didn't incidentally come across anything. But yeah, I would be interested to know if there was anything out there, paid versus unpaid.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I just wanted to ask mostly for the agency of the animal and how it educates the building of the animal enclosure such that the visitors can come and still have that enhanced experience, but that the animal doesn't have the fear response.
So do you mean in like enclosure design way, how you give
Exactly.
control to the animal?
Yes.
There are a lot of studies on that with regards to enclosure design, even with regards to the degree of access that you give visitors around the enclosure. There's been quite a few kind of zoo master plans that I've seen recently that it's this really kind of immersive experience where people can go through enclosures and around enclosures and then heads bopping up in the middle of enclosures through like spy holes and things like that. And certainly the literature on the other side would suggest that that sort of surround experience for the animals is not healthy. It's many enclosures, there's the idea that you should have only two sides accessible to the public, or the animals certainly have a way they can move back and retreat to. And I think in many ways we've come to this sort of, there's this middle discussion that needs to be had between immersive experiences for the public and lots of walkthroughs and drive-throughs, for example, and the experience of the animal with regards to be able to take control to moving away, having safe spaces, for example. And I certainly think there is a very positive welfare middle ground that can happen. But yeah, it is that compromise between having that really immersive and then handing the control back to the animals so they haven't got humans infiltrating everywhere when you can access them you can see them from the den side, and you can see them from the front side, and you can see them from the back side, and then the spy holes coming up in the middle. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Sally? So now we have an online presentation by Zorana Repac. She is a publishing manager for the Journal of Zoological and Botanical Gardens, and we are cooperating with them on this conference, just like we did the last year. I don't know if you had seen on our website, but there is a special offer from them as well, that if you are interested in publishing in their magazine, you can receive it or have it done free of charge. So she's just going to introduce their magazine and what they do. And Zorana, when you're ready, please share your screen.
Hello, everyone, once again. I'm truly glad to be able to participate in this year's conference, hear about all the amazing research that is done in ex-situ conservation and present our journal. Firstly, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Zorana Repac, and I'm currently publishing manager of JZBG, and I have been working in MDPI since August 2019. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in ecology, nature conservation and sustainable development at the University of Novi Sad, Serbia. Besides being publishing manager of JZBG, I'm also a publishing manager of Future Transportation and section managing editor for sustainability. Journal of Zoological and Botanical Gardens is an international, peer-reviewed, open-access journal on the intersection of fauna and flora conservation, published quarterly online by MDPI. It publishes reviews, original research papers, short communications, and opinion papers without limits in terms of the length of manuscripts. The Journal of Zoological and Botanical Gardens draws together expertise from biological, conservation, social sciences, and humanities to explore pure and applied research questions concerning the management, conservation, and sustainability of wildlife. The journal is indexed in DOAJ, and all editorial office is working hard to get it indexed by major databases. Scope of the journal is divided into 3 parts: species conservation, cultural heritage, and social sciences and education, and you will see them in detail on the next slide. Here is the scope of the journal, which is also available on the journal website. We are extremely proud of having an editorial board consistent of highly experienced experts. Our journal's founding editor is Professor Dr. Anna Loy from University of Molise. The journal board consists of 29 experts on ex-situ conservation of wildlife and 7 topical board members. The journal is run by Ms. Milica Adamovic as managing editor, by me as publishing manager, and Ms. Liane Fan as co-managing editor. We are extremely proud of the success we have made during the journal's first year. The journal's first issue was released in December 2020. Since then, we have published over 60 peer-reviewed papers, opened 7 special issues, with 3 of them publishing more than 10 papers. We are also truly glad to be partnering with this conference during last and this year, and we hope that our collaboration will continue during the next year. Participants of this conference are invited to submit their full papers, articles, or reviews free of charge to JZBG. The World Association of Zoos and Aquariums is affiliated with our journal, and their members receive discounts on the article processing charges. What we hope for in the future. We hope to publish more high-quality papers on ex-situ conservation, to open more special issues, and to collaborate with societies, universities, and conferences. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to inform you once again that if you're planning to publish the paper based on your presentation from this conference, we will be waiving the article processing charges. We invite you to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and if you have any further questions, you can contact us via email or contact directly Ms. Milica Adamovic and me. And thank you very much once again.
Thank you so much, Zorana. So if anyone has any questions for her, please feel free to send her an email, and she would be happy to answer.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to welcome you to our second session. My name is Stefan Worm. I'm educator here in the Serengeti Park. And now we will have 4 really interesting talks on different conservation topics. We will start with an online presentation from Dr. Thomas Hildebrandt. He is professor and chair of wildlife reproductive medicine at the Freie Universität Berlin. And he will talk about artificial reproduction on white rhinos. Okay. So please, Thomas, share your screen and have fun.
Yeah. Can you see the first image?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Good. Yes, first I'd like to express my great thank you to Ido and Fabrizio for this opportunity to speak here, and also to present some of the results which are based on a long-term collaboration between the Serengeti Park and our institute, which resulted in the first embryo transfer of a southern white rhino embryo in a wild rhino in the beginning of this year. But first, I like to lead you through this presentation and to give a little bit background information why we use quite advanced assisted reproduction technology and stem cell technology to save the northern white rhino. everything you see here is teamwork. For example, here on the upper corner, you see Julia Brunner, the current veterinarian at the Serengeti Park. She joined us in Africa. So, okay, why it is so important to use quite advanced scientific technologies to repair some of the problems we have. Here you see an overview of the loss of biodiversity in our planet. And if you asked the common man what is the most pressing problem on our planet, then you will always hear it's climate change. But actually, the loss of biodiversity is much more severe. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic showed what kind of consequences such disturbed ecosystem can have for the entire human society, because the germs, the coronavirus most likely came from wild individuals, and they came to the human society because there was no intact barrier anymore, and human interfered too much with the intact nature. In addition, we have this situation that we have wildlife crime for horn. Right now, the price for rhino horn is higher than for the price for gold. That drives quite a lot of criminal activity. So that is the current situation with the accelerated loss of biodiversity. We call it 6 mass extinction. But I want to go back a little bit to show you what was done as kind of conservation measures over the last centuries. This shows the time when Adam and Eve maybe were still alive. Nature was intact and there was no interfering with humans. But then in 1871, the first protected area was founded by the 18th president of the United States, the Yellowstone Park, which was a quite important step. Now we have more than 10% of our planet is protected area, and I think the goal is to boost that up to 30%. That helps quite a lot. It's secured in these areas quite nice biodiversity, but we have the situation that some of the, especially the large primates, even in protected areas, don't do so well. So captive breeding was introduced in the beginning of the 20th century to breed, for example, Schweitzer horses or Pear David's deer, and that was quite a successful program. Also, the European bison resulted, the population of European bison resulted from that. But then we had some species, for example, the black-footed ferret. Captive breeding itself was not successful because the genetic diversity of the individuals we had were not sufficient, and they were often infertile. So assisted reproduction was included into the program of the black-footed ferret and of the Californian condor. And then we have the northern white rhino, and we have only 2 females left. Both are infertile, and I will explain how you can set up a conservation program even if there's no male anymore, and both females are capable to carry into pregnancy. So that is another scenario. We have the human impact, which causes a reaction of the species. Some of the species go extinct, some recover nicely, and some never recover in a former status. And this is quite a specific situation. We have a human impact, we have the loss of individuals of the population, but we have parallel banked biomaterial, cryobanks, and that allows scientists to recreate the intact population later on by utilizing this biomaterial and then be successful after several years. So cryobanking buys time. It's a very important element of our conservation work. We have now double our capacity, and we have more than 300 species and several thousand individuals in our banks with living cells. So that's cells which can be grown into fibroblast culture, or we have semen or embryos or oocytes. So that the most simple step to produce offspring and to increase genetic variation is an artificial insemination. And that was successful with fresh semen and rhinos, with frozen semen and rhinos, collected semen from the wild, use that. So that is a very established technology, even if the patient is a little bit unusual. However, dealing with the northern white rhino, the declaration came up in 2006 that there's no wild northern white rhino anymore, and then in 2018, the last male items we have only Najin Pato, mother and daughter, that really puts a totally new dimension to the program. So, Sudan was quite an ambassador for the species, and which really caused a lot of outcry in the society when he died, because everyone recognized that we erased a 2-ton species from our planet only for their horn. The northern white rhino is declared right now as a subspecies of the white rhino. There's also the southern white rhino, but some scientists believe it's an independent species because morphologically they're totally different. I'll show you that in a second. We have the black rhino, which is doing relatively well. There are more than 4,500 rhinos, Indian rhinos also more than 4,500 rhinos. Javan rhino is very critical situation. It's maybe 50 on a very small scale. The Sumatran rhino is declining dramatically over the last years, and might be only 50 or 30 left. And here's the overview what is still remaining from the northern white rhinos. All these rhinos came from the zoo. The Birkendorf Zoo was the only zoo in the world which was capable to breed the northern white rhinos. Najin and Fantu were born in Birkendorf. All these individuals which are gone, we still have biomaterial from them, living biomaterial, and we will use that in our breeding program. In 2015, we had the first meeting about the global strategy. About a global strategy to save the northern white rhinos with our American, Australian, and European colleagues, and we came up with this master strategy. Both columns describe techniques using natural gametes and constructed gametes. I will explain that a bit more. Natural gametes means we have to use the frozen semen. We have banked, we have about 300 milliliter from 4 different bulls in our bank, and we have to harvest the oocyte to produce embryos. Here is both northern white rhinos, Najin and Fatu. She was not so happy because we had taken blood before. Oh. Sorry. Okay, that is Najin taking a mad bath. That shows quite nicely the morphological differences. Northern white rhinos have hairs on the ear. They have no hair on the body surface. There's a lot of pearls on the body surface, and they don't have such pronounced neck like a southern white rhino. So if you work with an work with an Außenwald rhino or any wild patient, you always have to take into account that you work with a black box. If you go to a hospital as a human patient, you get a kind of document where you have to answer a lot of questions. Our rhinos, our patients, don't use these kind of questionnaire, and therefore you can have some surprises. We see in a procedure like a semen collection in a rhino which didn't produce any offspring. Our colleague used a too high dose the anesthetic drug, and therefore the rhino stopped breathing and had no heartbeat anymore. Sometimes you have to develop new measures. Don't try that at home. It's not suitable for humans, but it worked quite well for our rhino. So we could save our rhino such way that woke up and then after data it produced 2 new calves, which was quite surprising. Some people say it was afraid to have another of these procedure. And a student of mine got a little bit brain damage and then it liked the females. We don't know the answer. But if you have a well-performed anesthesia, then we can think about ovum pickup, which is quite a new technique for megavertebrates. You have to go through the rectum, the patent device, visualize the ovaries, which are about double egg, chicken egg big, and then you harvest the oocyte. You have to take into account that there are big blood vessels next to it, so it has to be performed very precisely. And that is how it looks from inside. So we see the ovary with several follicles. Our needle is injected into the follicle, and the fluid is aspirated, and then the follicle is refilled several times to make sure that the oocyte comes out. And here you see such oocyte and oocyte maturation, then the tumulus, that's the surrounding cells expanding, and then the oocyte will be fertilized with the frozen semen and then divides to an early embryo. And when it reaches the blastocyst stage, we actually freeze it in liquid nitrogen. The transfer, which we performed in Africa in January, is also performed through the rectum because the cervix is too big obstacle to overcome. And we use the needle ultrasound guidance, feed the catheter through the needle, and then place the embryo inside the uterus. So far, we have received several early pregnancies, but we have not established a complete pregnancy yet with this technique. We use exclusively southern white rhinos so far because we try to develop a protocol for the northern white rhino. The second column, the constructed gametes, are quite important for the genetic diversity because then we can use all the biomaterial which is stored in cryobanks all over the world. That means use the technology which was developed by Ann-Kathrin Oerke in 2012, which allows to transform a fibroblast, a cell from the skin, into an pluripotent stem cell, and then take out of these pluripotent stem cell embryos via the step oocytes and sperm. So fibroblast cultures from northern white rhinos are easy to establish. And here you see one transformation which we already did successfully, transform fibroblasts into cardiomyocytes, but working now, published that recently, the goal to the cells which are the grandfathers of the oocyte producing cells, the so-called primary germ cells. That's the cell which migrates into the embryonic gonads, and they produce then spermatogonia or an oogonia. So that is another way to use to visualize that. Plan one is natural gametes, plane two is the artificial gametes. We will join them together to use sufficient genetic diversity. This is not only a dream. Our collaborator who is in our team, Katsuhiko Hayashi, shows a full cycle on a mouse model, so on a mammal. He produced out of a skin sample living babies. Currently, we have, as I mentioned, more than 300 species in our biobank. So this technology might be also relevant for other species, not only the northern white rhino, to improve genetic diversity of existing populations, and therefore it's important to bank a lot of this biomaterial. Here's another overview of what we have. So we have one extinct species in our biobank. We have critical endangered species. There is quite a lot of material. We also bank every wolf which is found dead in Germany. If there are still living cells on this carcass, then we establish cell line packets, and we have more than 100 wolf samples. We developed a kind of overarching theme. It's called Mind Initiative, meaning mirroring nature's diversity. So we have to bank as much of genetic diversity so that we always have a kind of backup. And this banking we prefer or we refer only to living cells, not genetic material. The Kenyan government is highly supportive to this program. They put Latino Fatu on one of their streamliner. So we are quite happy with this process of capacity building. And we hope that this is an historical image of mating of a northern white rhino, that this technology I described here will help that we can reintroduce a northern white rhino to the wild, let the rhino do what they did for millions of years. And I think it's important in this program to have partners. Therefore, we are very happy for working with the Serengeti-Park, one of the most successful southern white rhino breeders in Europe, that we have Fabrizio and Ivo as partner. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas, for your really interesting talk. Are there any questions? Okay. Is there a question from the online? Also not. Yeah. Thank you again. You have one of.
Oh, this will be quick. So seeing all the problems that are being encountered with the Rhino project, what do you foresee could be a solution to facilitate the process? Maybe you have to change something in your procedure, or what do you think could be for the future?
Yeah, the point is that this kind of approach is totally new. We step over new land, and therefore a lot of basic research is required. However, what we see already is that, for example, our Indonesian colleagues with the Sumatran rhino are extremely interested to join us to utilize this gained knowledge, because that is totally new. Nobody has done embryo transfer or oocyte collection in the megavertebrate before. So I think it is a slow process, because everything has to be ethically approved, and we have to develop technologies which are not established before. We can't use assisted reproduction techniques from the human medicine or from the livestock industry. So we always have to develop new approaches. But if we have it in our hand, then I think it is a very useful tool for other critical endangered species. And we focusing mainly on keystone species because they are the garant for a lot of other species like plants, insects, small mammals. If a keystone species is going extinct, then there is this so-called vortex effect, and then we're losing quite a lot of other species. So I think it is a slow process, but it is worth to go it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I think we can go to the next talk. Thank you, Thomas, again.
Thank you.
Dr. Laurie Marker. She is founder and executive director from the Cheetah Conservation Fund and also one of the world's best known cheetah experts. I'm happy that she can join us today. We will play her talk for her, and after that she is open for questions.
Hi, I'm Dr. Laurie Marker, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Cheetah Conservation Fund. And it's great to be with you today at the second international meeting on zoo research, conservation, and biodiversity. I'm going to talk to you today about CCF's approach to tackling illegal wildlife trade in cheetahs. Unfortunately, today, the cheetah is Africa's most endangered big cat. It is extinct in over 20 countries. We've lost over 90% of their range in the last 100 years. Today, we're down to around 31 populations in 23 countries. 20 of those populations are under 100 individuals. Most of them are outside of protected areas, and most of them are also found in the southern part of Africa, where I'm based. I'm in Namibia, where our base is, and I've been here for about 32 years. And our other base now that we've recently set up is in Somaliland. But today, with less than 7,500 cheetahs left, we have a lot that we need to do to save them. The threats are varied. Similar to most animals, loss of habitat. For large carnivores, human-wildlife conflict. Unfortunately, the cheetah is an animal that lacks genetic diversity. And today, with 20 populations being small and fragmented, they even have a greater problem. And then there is the illegal wildlife pet trade that I'm going to talk with you about today. So when I look at a cheetah litter of cubs, I always wonder, what will their future be? I founded the Cheetah Conservation Fund in 1990 to save the cheetah. And with that, we've got a variety of programs that we work with. That of ecology, research and genetics, economic development, education and training, One Health, land management, hospitality, habitat restoration, and illegal wildlife trade, regulations, and enforcement. The faces of illegal wildlife trafficking are usually thought of as with the rhinos and elephants, but the cheetah is also affected by this. But the capture and taming of trade of cheetahs is nothing new. For about 5,000 years, kings, princes, and emperors kept cheetahs as pets. But today, the real problem is that around the illegal wildlife pet trade. There's a demand for the illegal trade, and that there's drivers, and those drivers really around being a status symbol in the Middle East. Or oftentimes conservation misunderstandings. Oftentimes people think that keeping cheetahs in captivity is going to save the species. And these are not recognized zoological institutions like you all are. And then there is the compassion that the cheetah cubs look for sale, look small and sick, and so people want to buy them to save their lives. This is also promoted in social media, especially in the Middle East, where many of the people have these cheetahs and are putting them on Facebook and Twitter. So please always say no to this, and that cheetahs need to be in the wild. Today, the trafficking is out of hand. The illegal wildlife trade in cubs has been about 300 a year that we've actually been monitoring for a number of years. They go from about $200 to $300 in the Horn of Africa. And once they reach the Middle East, usually they're about 15,000 US dollars. And this is how they're transported. Now, we got involved in the illegal wildlife trade back around 2005 with these two cheetahs named Patch and Scout. Today, the cubs taken from the wild, we see about 50% of them don't make it, even when if in confiscation. They die. If they're confiscated, about 50% of them die. And if they are made it into the illegal wildlife pet trade, about 20% of them survive. So about 80% of them die. It's really horrible. And we've been tracking this for a number of years. So this is our approach. We've looked at the supply and the demand, and what we're trying to do is actually look at these trade consequences. We've got individual animals. We've got to deal with emergency vet care, long life housing care, and cheetah care training. And then there's the populations. We're looking at population surveys of where they're found, the genetic makeup of these populations, and then to look at potential rehabilitation of these cubs that have gone through horrific young care. So I'm going to bring you into Somaliland, and we set up our Somaliland base in 2018 to try to stop the illegal wildlife trade and to care for confiscated cubs. Our confiscations have continued. We started in 2011 in Somaliland and didn't move there until 2018. Although there were almost 50 cheetahs or more that were confiscated before 2018, most of those animals died, and the handful that did live, we were able to put into other facilities. So from 2018 until 2022, we've had several hundred cheetahs that have come to us, and our care is considerable. We've had to develop safe houses. We have 3 today. We have a well-equipped veterinary clinic. We have an education and training house, and we have a small staff house, which is also our office. This is one of our safe houses, overlooking it from our staff house, where we are housing about 25 cheetahs in this area right now. Just to give you an idea what our neighborhood looks like, we have 5 facilities, all within about a 3-block area in the outskirts of Hargeisa, Somaliland. Within the safe house, we have to look at health and welfare considerations. And just to give you a profile of what these confiscated cubs look like, they're usually between 2 weeks to a couple months of age. They've been taken from their mothers prematurely. Their health, they're dehydrated, they're emaciated, many nutritional deficiencies, they're under severe stress. They've not had any exercise. Oftentimes they've been tied up by ropes, and they're oftentimes carrying disease, or they're much more prone to contracting disease because of the health issues that they are in. Once they arrive at our center, they go through an initial clinical examination. We look at triage. Oftentimes we get 15, sometimes 20 animals in all at a time. Many of them are about dead or are actually dead when they arrive to us. But oftentimes we have to, in the triage, look at who we're going to treat first. They're usually always given sub-Q fluids or IV fluids if necessary, antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, pain relief. So all of these things are what we have to do immediately when they arrive. They need 24/7 care, round the clock, and this is critical in order to take care of them. Some of the health issues that we're dealing with are horrible: malnutrition, dehydration, pathological fractures, metabolic bone disease, respiratory infections, viral diseases like feline infectious peritonitis. It's just been horrible. External and internal parasites, bacterial gastroenteritis, foreign bodies, possible toxocysis, trauma, and all of this means we have to be continually screening for diseases. And these are the infectious diseases that we're constantly looking at. And then we're also taking samples and looking at the genetic makeup of these animals and where they've come from. We use our lab in Namibia, and we look at understanding the species identification, population genetics, as well as looking at diseases. But we want to stop the illegal wildlife trade. And with this, to introduce you to Dr. Shira. She is our crime lead, and she'll be answering questions for you after the talk today. And we were just in CITES, the Standing Committee 74 in February, where again we brought up the issues around illegal wildlife trade of cheetahs. We started a really important program in 2019, and this was supported by the British government and DEFRA. And with this, we are looking at it's called LICIT, and the Legal Intelligence for Cheetah Illicit Trade. We're working with governments of Ethiopia, Somalia, Somaliland, and Yemen, all the real hard areas to work in. Today, though, with this program, we've been looking at legal reform, enforcement and judiciary training, community engagement, and network building. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about these. With our legal reform, we've been looking at all of the existing laws within these 4 judiciaries. We're also looking at the gap and identification of where these laws can be enhanced, proposed legislative agendas, and training of prosecutors and judges. At the same time, we've been doing training, enforcement, and judiciary work, regionally and nationally. We've conducted workshops for the last couple of years and online webinars and practical training. We've also been doing a lot of community engagement, awareness campaigns. Here we are in the western region of Somaliland, where we have done a lot of work. With this, our community engagement also includes coexistence with wildlife, wildlife crime awareness, collaboration with enforcement, and welfare of confiscated cubs. And with this, we've developed a training program for caregivers. And from this, we've looked at working with a variety of different veterinary groups and universities. We've looked at animal care and handling, triage, and first aid for confiscated officials. While Somaliland Veterinarians Organization and the Ethiopian Vets, Women's Veterinarians, Society of Somaliland, Hargeisa University, and Gaulis University. We've also been working with several foreign zoo veterinary specialists, as well as student interns, like Veterinarians Without Borders. Our veterinary training was very well received, and we were able to train people not only from Somaliland, but on the Somali region of Ethiopia, which borders Somaliland. Now we've got 16 veterinarians that are trained for firsthand training. Our community engagement has gone out and about in the western area and the border of Ethiopia to spread the word that cheetahs aren't pets. Keep the wild in the wild, and working with communities to find out more about what their problems are, and teaching young children in schools. But what we actually found out is much of this trade is really linked to people's economics and that of human-wildlife conflict, with the cheetahs and other predators catching their livestock. But these are some of the examples of the handouts we've been working on. Everything's been translated into Somali, but again, removing the wildlife from the wild is illegal. So the LICIT project, this is also a bumper sticker that we put out everywhere. It's talking about keeping animals living in the wild and who our partners are in the LICIT program. Also talking about the big cats of Somaliland. And do you know the difference? Because most people don't, especially when you come to the border patrols and the customs control. Trying to teach them the differences of the big cats they should know all about, each one of them, but just to be aware that all of the different cats come in different sizes and shapes. And our network building is also very important between these 4 judiciaries. One of the programs that we've been working with is called HOWEN, which is the Horn of Africa Wildlife Enforcement Network, and EGAD, which is the whole region. We've been trying to look at a lot of cross-border collaborations. This is where the trade is coming from. The green areas are where we think the cheetah ranges are, and the red areas are where we are seeing the incidence of the trafficking of where these cheetahs have come from. So we've been doing these regional meetings between Somaliland and the Ethiopia-Somaliland region. And these have been very important workshops because the teams of networks between the 2 governments are now working together when they hear information from one country to the other, trying to help stop the traffickers as they move along. We've just done a very extensive workshop in Ethiopia in February, where we brought together Ethiopians, Yemens, and Somali members of the judiciary, of the courts, the police, as well as the wildlife departments, to teach them together many of the issues around how to confiscate property, animals, and conduct a confiscation of illegal wildlife trade. And in awareness becomes very important. And we encourage both countries to support International Cheetah Day. Here we are in Somaliland, where we've actually conducted 3 years of International Cheetah Day activities. And we encourage zoos around the world to get involved with us also, to spread the word that cheetahs are Africa's most endangered big cat. We need to do everything that we can to save them. And that means also stopping illegal wildlife trade. So our work is not done. We do need a permanent sanctuary. Today we have 84 cheetahs living at our safe houses and 1 leopard. And just to give you an idea, since September, we've had 37 cheetahs come in. The last one's coming in just last week. So our solutions are building a new center. We've set up a 30-year MOU with the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change in Somaliland, and we've developed a master plan. The government has given us 50,000 hectares, about an hour outside of Hargeisa, in the first to-be national park. It's called Gedebli, and our program is developing a cheetah sanctuary, education, and training center. So far, we've been developing 400 hectares. We've got a great master plan, and our center is going to be called the CCF Somaliland Cheetah Rescue, Conservation, and Training Center. Our center is in building right now, and it's pretty exciting. It's going to be a place where we can hold cheetahs in very large enclosures and protect other wildlife, protect habitat, and conduct education and public outreach. But our solutions are also around demand reduction. And we've been also working in the Middle East to try to stop the trade through education and political pressure. And we will continue with this. And we're hoping to have a demand reduction campaign started within the next year. So our solutions are called RAID: reduce supply and demand, awareness through education, and together we want to keep cheetahs living free and in the wild. And I encourage you all to try to get our cheetah book, which is Cheetahs, Biology and Conservation. And it's the diversity of the world from genes to landscapes. 40 chapters, 160 co-authors, and you can learn all about how to save the cheetah, as well as how to stop the illegal wildlife pet trade. So thank you very much, and I hope your conference is great, and look forward to answering some questions with you today as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie, for your really interesting talk. Are there any questions for her? Yeah.
Thank you very much for that talk. I was just curious with regards to the safe houses that you set up in Somaliland. Just curious to find out, safe house in human terms would be kept under kind of a cloak of secrecy. Was that the case with yourselves, or was there a like community engagement within that immediate town that you were in, and how was it received by the people that you were immediately neighbours with, having a cheetah safe house within their town? Was it welcomed? Was there animosity? I was interested to know.
Well, thank you. We have a lot of security guards with us, and so it is heavily guarded. And the community is not an animal community. The whole country is not an animal country. And so we are considered a bit of an oddity, I guess one would say. But we've got a lot of government support, and we're protected there at least. And but are kind of under constant, scrutiny, just trying to make sure that we are safe. Somaliland is a very safe country. It is a breakaway of Somalia. We also, I might put a plug in here, are always looking for needs of keepers to take care of these animals. We have had a lot of great support from the European Zoo and UK Zoo associations who have helped bring keepers in to help us take care of these animals at this point in time, as well as veterinarians. So from your point, yes, it is a safe house, and that's why we're trying to move out into the area called Gedebli. And I don't think that the slides all showed, but we are in building right now of a huge 400-hectare area where the cheetahs will be in very large natural enclosures, very similar to what we have in Namibia. So would welcome any of you to come and learn more, but illegal wildlife pet trade is really not great. And to see these cubs come in and see them in such a horrible condition when they do come in, and then to know that most of them then don't make it into the trade. We really need to work with our friends over in the Middle East to try to get them to stop their demand on wanting to have this kind of a status symbol. So please always say no on social media, please.
Yes, thank you. Oh, there's another question.
Hi, thank you very much for that talk. I have a question. Is it mainly that the cheetah cubs are taken from the wild, or are there also many illegal breeding factories around?
Well, if any of you are people who work with cheetahs, cheetahs are an animal that don't breed well in captivity. So even the best zoos in the world have not had very good success breeding. I am the International Cheetah Stud Book keeper and set up the stud book around 35 years ago. With that, at this point in time, if we are lucky from all the zoos in the world, we may have 100 to 150 cubs born a year. They are a very, very hard animal to breed. So most of these are caught in the wild. What we see is that they actually track down females after them coming into their livestock herds and have found that they can find where the dens are and steal the cubs. So it is from the wild, direct from the wild, and they are thinning out the wild population at a huge number.
Okay, if there's no other question, Laurie, thank you so much for being part of our conference. Yeah.
I'd like to thank you guys from your zoo as well for the support that you've given us in our work in Namibia too, with habitat restoration and the work that we're doing around all these other projects of trying to help save the cheetah in the wild, which I didn't talk about. I only told you about the illegal wildlife trade. But welcome you to either Namibia or to Somaliland, and would love your ongoing support. So thank you, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there today with you. Have a great conference.
Thank you. Okay, then we will have our next talk. That's the talk of Max Birkendorfer. As Ido said before, he's not able to join us today. Max is curator for reptiles and bird in Zona Wied, and he's also head of the parrot working group within the ZGAP, the Zoological Society of the Conservation of Species and Populations. And as you see, he sent us a pre-recorded talk, so yeah, let's play it.
Hi, Hodenhagen. Conservation projects for endangered parrot species by ZGAP's FBP. To start with, I really liked Dr. Fabrizio Sepe's introductory words we were able to see in the booklet, as he mentioned that only together we can succeed in advancing practical and honest research-based solutions to present and future issues affecting conservation and biodiversity. By doing so, we create and allow a far more suitable environment to live in, and we provide evidence showing that humans, nature, and animals can live in harmony. So thanks for that. And thank you, Serengeti-Park team, for offering me the opportunity to introduce ZGAP and its parrot working group FBP. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to introduce ourselves and our conservation work here today, and I of course hope that all of you are having a great time together after the last 2 digital years without any real conferences in presence. So yeah, my name is Max Birkendorf. I live next to the River Rhine in between the cities of Cologne and Frankfurt. at Neuwied, and I work at the EASA and VDZ institution Neuwied Zoo as a curator of mainly birds and reptiles. And furthermore, I voluntarily lead the parrot working group FPP I want to talk about here today. The Zoological Society for the Protection of Species and Populations, ZGAP, or in original, Zoologische Gesellschaft für Arten und Populationsschutz, was founded in 1982 already. So it turns 40 this year, and there's going to be a big party in June. By a handful of committed people in the Munich area to lobby for unknown but highly endangered species and to stand up for their interests in their natural habitats. We have two mottos, which is on the one hand, help for unknown but highly threatened species, and on the other hand, saving species and preserving diversity. So as you may see here in German again. Even then, a large part of the public knew about the threat to pandas, giraffes, rhinos, polar bears, but hardly about the threat to hornbills, western hazel grouse, Prince Alfred deer, and pacaranas, for example. These and other species are highly endangered and have been pushed to the brink of extinction by us humans, so almost unnoticed in the case of the species I mentioned. And that's unfortunately the sad reason for us to meet here today at Serengeti-Park. In order to also focus specifically on unknown but highly threatened parrot species, the Parrot Conservation Working Group, now known as the Fund for Threatened Parrots, or FBP, Fonds für bedrohte Papageien, was established within ZGAP in 1989. So please find some amazing species we took care of during the last 40 years here in this picture. The main objective of ZGAP and in turn of FPP in relation to parrot species is always to protect unknown, highly endangered parrot species in mainly non-industrialized countries by supporting sanctuaries and breeding sites in Southeast Asia, Africa, and South America in their establishment and long-term sustainable operation. On the second, supporting field research in the habitats of the animals, both financially and with expertise. The local population within the natural range of the species is actively involved and supported in the conservation work. And long-term cooperation is established with local project partners. So these four things are the main goals we have. All this is achieved through the broad financial support of the individual ZGAP members and member organizations such as zoos and zoo support associations, companies and other organizations or associations. But above all, through the voluntary work of the ZGAP board and its advisory board, as well as the work within the individual working groups. To give you all a precise overview of the ZGAP work of the past years, please have a look here. So, thanks to numerous supporters, we have already been able to move a lot since 1982, more than 4.5 million euros funding, more than 309 projects we took care of in more than 50 countries, and we were able to support more than 284 threatened species, and more than 100 of them were parrot species or subspecies. So, since 2016, the ZGAP, as an organization with a strong affinity for zoos, together with partner organizations such as the VDZ, DTG and GDZ, has been shining the spotlight for zoo visitors on a species that changes every year and is little known but also highly endangered. The aim is to acquire funds for selected in-situ conservation projects through joint advertising measures. In 2017, the cockatoo was the first bird in this row, followed by Bios in 2020, and my favorite bird, the crocodile, in 2021. The Zootier des Jahres campaign is getting bigger and bigger from year to year, and I'm personally very happy to see this development. So this year we try to focus on the critically endangered warty pig of the Philippines in general. So please open your eyes for this unknown and often labeled as uninteresting pig, even if it's not a colorful parrot. Yeah, and as you can see on this page, there is a large number of international zoos and zoo support associations, especially in German-speaking countries, but not only. And they are all among our partners, so I would like to take this opportunity to thank them for their support. And now all of us are wondering, why is the title of this presentation regarding to parrots, and what does all of this have to do with parrots? So I needed to talk about that before getting into the topic right now, because in 1989, the Parrot Conservation Working Group, which is now known as the Fund for Threatened Parrots or Fonds für bedrohte Papageien, FBP, was established within ZGAP in order to focus specifically on unknown but highly threatened parrot species. And the ever-increasing threat to wild parrot populations and the associated dramatic decline of many species requires intensive and targeted conservation measures, more than ever, unfortunately. Field surveys have shown that a quarter of all parrot species are threatened, and of these again, a quarter are even highly endangered. The main reasons for this are the ongoing habitat destruction, such as through slash and burn or human population growth on the one hand, but also still in the international bird trade on the other hand. Within the FBP, many research and species conservation projects in Southeast Asia, in Africa, Central and South America have been the focus of efforts over the past more than 30 years. Since 1998, in close cooperation with the Strunden Papageienstiftung or Strunden Parrot Foundation, you may see on the middle part of this picture where I was able to show their logo. The members of the FBP working group naturally have the interests of buttery jar cockatiel, blue and yellow macaw, blue-fronted Amazon close to their hearts, but they are not the focus of species conservation efforts as long as they are not necessary, luckily. Species threatened with extinction but less popular, such as orange-crested cockatoo, Iligas macaw, Santa Marta parakeet, and Ecuadorian Amazon parrot, for example, are the ones that form the target of our work here. So we try to finance this by also offering a parrot conference once a year, which is organized by the working group members you may see on the left. And all profits from these events go one-to-one into the field projects we look after. And last year, the FBP Papageientagung was held digitally for the very first time. And in November this year, so 2022, it will be held again in presence, hopefully. Let's see how that works. But now let's get closer to our projects. I would like to show you just some of them we took care of during the last recent years. See 3 of them here. It is the Venaceous breasted Amazon in Brazil. That's her. Then the Ecuadorian Amazon parrot in Ecuador, of course, and the gray-breasted parakeet in Brazil. On the one hand, and on the other hand, if we turn the globe a little, we may find some projects we supported to support the African grey parrots in Cameroon and, of course, the highly threatened red-vented cockatoo in Palawan on the Philippines. I decided just to use the next 10 minutes to present you 3 of those projects and to give you some hints about the work we do right there in those projects and what we do there. So let's start with the Ecuadorian Amazon parrot, Amazona lilakina. ZGAP funded this bird firstly in 1984 already, so a long time ago. And that was 2 years after ZGAP's founding already. So There is a funding we do on our own from ZGAP's money, but there is a huge funding from Bird Park Marlow, Bird Park Heiligenkirchen, and Neuwied Zoo as well. More than 50,000 euro came from Bird Park Marlow in 2020, so thanks a lot for that. The Ecuadorian Amazon parrot is listed as critically endangered by IUCN, and unfortunately, the population is still declining, and there are less than 2,500 animals left in the wild, which is a very small number. Yeah, we'll see that later. In Ecuador, we have been working with the NGO Yoku Toko for a long time already. This NGO has dedicated itself to the protection of the habitats of various bird species in various places throughout the country within the framework of 15 reserves. In the Las Balsas region, since 2019, they take care of the Ecuadorian Amazon parrot now. And over the past few years, the Ecuadorian Amazon parrot's population was first sighted and counted on an area of 98 hectares. So ZGAP had also been significantly involved in this project already. Yoku Toko acquired this land, and which is primarily home to carob trees you may see here. In German it is Johannisbrotbäume. Maybe you know that fruit when you eat your cereals in the morning. And it was discovered that a large proportion of the wild Ecuadorian Amazon parrot, so more than 2,000 individuals of a population of 2,500 in general, spent the nights right here in those trees. So that was a big experience to see and to figure out. Potential nesting sites corresponding tree hollows were also found during these studies. And in 2020, 50 nest boxes were installed to create even more breeding opportunities. Many of the potential nests had already been destroyed by clearing for agricultural purposes and are now missing on site, unfortunately again. This project is a prime example of working with and including the local population. With the help of workshops with local community representatives, the problems of habitat destruction are explained, and the dramatic population trend of many bird species, not only the Ecuadorian Amazon, is pointed out. So as you see in this beautiful landscape, there are many developments regarding the agricultural reasons, and we need to see that we may take care of a lot of bird species right there, and even the mammal fans amongst you will see that we may support lots of interesting species here in this case. Let's go to the second funny parrot, which is the African gray parrot. Many of you will know, as I guess all of you have already seen at least one or 10,000 times, I don't know. ZGAP started funding in 2019, so it's a quite fresh one. The funding amount was more than 7,000 euros, and it was from Bird Park Marlow again, so thanks to the colleagues of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. This one is a very good example how illegal capture for Western gray for Western pet market can bring a species to the brink of extinction. This species was endangered since endangered to 1916 by IUCN, but now it is not longer. No, that was the wrong term. So it is not longer just vulnerable as it was to 2016, but it's now listed as endangered. Population numbers are absolutely unclear, and there are estimations between 12 million birds and 500,000 individuals, which is a huge, massive range. However, this estimate dates back to the 1990s, and there are no more recent ones, which is a huge problem at all. But it's hard to say, because export figures of over 30,000 individuals per year in the early 1990s via Togo and Ivory Coast alone. However, in 2018, more than 630 grey and Timney parrots illegally imported from West African countries were offered for sale in street markets and on social media platforms in the North African state of Algeria alone. So just keep in mind these huge numbers of countries in North Africa where they get sold to private keepers, or I don't know where. So it's hard to say how many are left in the West African states where they normally are from. So scholarship, language skills, and playfulness of these birds are still very, very high on the agenda of private parrot keepers, I think. In order to put a stop to the illegal capture and trade of native animals, Cameroon's Ministry of Environment, together with the NGO Pandrillos Foundation, initiated the Limbe Wildlife Center, LWC, in the port city of Limbe in the southwest of the country in 1993 already. In addition to gorillas, chimpanzees, and rills, grey parrots are a particular focus on efforts here. And the LWC is considered a national rescue rehab center, especially for feathered victims of the illegal wildlife trade. Since its foundation 29 years ago, more than 3,000 grey parrots have been taken in at the LWC. Most of these animals arrive at the center in poor physical condition, and usually 90% of illegally traded grey parrots die before the final export from their home continent. So they dehydrated, starved, with clipped wing feathers and often covered in parasites. Some survivors arrive at the LWC after being confiscated by authorities. And in 2019 and 2020, a total of 395 grey parrots arrived at the center. 40% of these were already in such hopelessly poor condition that they couldn't be saved from death within the first 3 weeks of their arrival at the center. But 236 individuals, however, passed through the local quarantine, and a large proportion of these were able to take the next step towards returning to the rainforest. In the station's veterinary complex, which was renovated in 2019, more than 1,100 veterinary examinations were carried out on grey parrots in 2 years alone. And in addition to the veterinary complex, another milestone was set in 2019. A large round flight aviary was completed at the LWC in October, in which up to 150 grey parrots can simultaneously rebuild their flight muscles and train for longer flights. So the aviary covers a space of more than 700 cubic meters, and during 2020, 215 of these birds, of the birds rescued the previous year, underwent training in this enclosure to regain the ability to fly together with conspecifics. In turn, 125 individuals from this group were able to move into the adjacent soft-release aviaries in the same year, and this corresponds to just under a third of the birds confiscated by the government in 2019. More are to follow, of course, hopefully. Close monitoring of these and the following birds is planned for the future, for example, with the help of GPS transmitters. The movement patterns of the birds can be tracked, and recapture by poachers can be prevented in the medium term. I know that 20 minutes are already over, so I'm going to hurry up a little for the third project, but it's a very interesting one, so I would like you to see more about it. It's regarding the red-vented cockatoo. We support since 1999 already. And again, one of the huge partners is Birdpark Marlow, but we do it together with SPS and the Vogelfreunde Aachen e.V. in 2021 again. Red-vented cockatoo is critically endangered, and less than 750 birds are left in the wild according to IUCN. So please compare that 750 individuals to, I don't know, 12 million to 500,000 gray parrots left, and both species are highly threatened. So this is a problem. This project, which has fortunately been more and more successful for 20 years already, follows a very holistic approach, and it includes the monitoring of potential nests, population numbers on various islands in the surrounding area, the establishment of protected areas, habitat improvements, conservation education, and wildlife rescue with subsequent reintroduction. In other words, it combines many of the things we have already discussed in the previous two projects. Project partners on the ground climb trees and check potential nesting holes. Please note the thickness of the tree trunks here, which is so immensely important for the successful breeding of so many parrot species, and especially for different cockatoos. Some of the animals are fitted with a very light GPS tracker to learn more about the survival chances of young cockatoos and to be able to track them perfectly for a while. Interestingly, outside the breeding season, most cockatoos sleep almost all in the same place or in the same tree and only retreat to individual sites for breeding. Individuals and flocks are counted very regularly by the team of Katala Foundation. And in some past years, when the weather constellations were so unfavorable that many individuals threatened to die, individuals were also treated in their nests or even taken for hand rearing and later reintroduction. The team around Indira and Peter Whitman is also incredibly active in environmental education. From the beginning, the goal was to win ex-poachers as supporters for the project. After all, their experience in climbing and knowledge of local occurrences is unbeatable. Today, many ex-poachers work as rangers for the Katala Foundation, so the cockatoo still feeds their families, but in a different way than before. Normally, many environmental education measures take place face-to-face, where above all, children are to be made aware of the ideal and cultural and not the monetary value of the cockatoo, as well as the work for species conservation itself. This is regularly done through festivals, school visits, lectures, discussions, but also mascot visits and puppet shows, as you may see. Of course, this work suffered particularly during the COVID pandemic with its restrictions. However, public relations work via social media was significantly expanded during the last years. Thanks to the long-term and well-structured one-site program, things are currently looking good around the Katala. The hatching rates for 2020 were also consistently positive, but it remains exciting to see how the beak and feather disease, like parrot keepers of you may know, like PBFD or the virus illness that is triggered by circoviruses in parrots. How that one will affect the population, it's hard to see now. But around Christmas last year, the Typhoon Rai or Odette, which killed more than 500 people in the Indonesian region and cost countless people their homes, also hit Palawan, and it is suspected that some cockatoos and of course several different animals as well were also killed during this disaster. Furthermore, buildings and lots of materials of the Katala Foundation were damaged, so unfortunately that donations are still needed to support this huge project we support for years already. And Indira and Peter Whitman will be very grateful for more donations, of course. So if you or your institution would like to support ZGAP projects financially or even become a ZGAP member, please check out our website www.zgap.de. And furthermore, even more important from my personal point of view, is that if you are interested in parrots, their keeping and above all, of course, their protection and conservation matters, make a note of this date and come to our conference in Darmstadt in November of this year. I would be very, very pleased to welcome one or two of you there, and I'm looking forward to meeting you. So now it's more than 25 minutes. Sorry, Edu. I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to talk to you, and of course there will be a question and answering session now or later on. So I'm looking forward to your questions and to your requests. Have a great day together, and please have fun and take care of species and species conservation. Thank you.
Interesting talk. Due to his absence, we go to our last talk. I'm happy to introduce Ann-Kathrin Oerke, head of the European Elephant Service, and since 2020 she's also scientific advisor of the Myanmar Elephant Project, which she wants to talk about today.
Thank you very much. Mingala Pa, that is Burmese and means hello. And actually, I hope that you still have enough energy for the last talk before lunch. It's about, sorry, I don't see my first slide. Okay. But it's on elephant and it's live, so that's the difference of the talks before, yeah. So I would like today to present an elephant project in the north of Myanmar. And as Stefan already said, I'm actually working with zoo elephants because I'm running the European Elephant Service at the German Primate Centre. But I'm also a member of Chances for Nature. And Chances for Nature came up with this project to me 2 years ago, and now I'm scientific advisor. And we are running this project together with Friends of Wildlife, which is our collaborator in Myanmar, so our local partner. So please let me take you to Lake Indawgyi, where we are running an elephant project and we are helping and supporting captive and wild elephants. Now, as you might know, Myanmar is one of the 13 home range countries of the Asian elephants. There are less than 2,000 elephants left in the wild, and they are living in fragmented populations. And their life is still threatened because they are poached for tusks, they are killed for their skin, and young animals are also still caught and smuggled over the borders into tourist camps in Thailand and China. On the other hand, Myanmar has over 5,000 captive elephants. That's the largest number in the world, right? And 3,000 of them are government-owned elephants. That's the so-called Myanmar timber elephants. And around 2,000 elephants are privately owned. Now, captive elephants in Myanmar are working elephants. They used to work in the forest as timber elephants, but due to the logging ban in 2014, they are now workless. And that means that they are increasing time standing on chains. And since they are not in the forest anymore, they have only restricted feeding grounds. And this is leading to increasing health problems for these elephants. And of course, the elephant owners need an alternative income to keep the elephants and to look after them. And therefore, they rent the elephants out for illegal logging. This would look like this, but it's weird because actually the captive elephants are destroying the habitat of the wild elephants, but also, of course, of other species. And this is also the case in the area where we work, just to show you for people that are not traveling in Asia a lot. Myanmar is here. And if you look on the map of Myanmar, which is shown here, we are here in the north, and that's Lake Indawgyi. And this lake is shown on the satellite picture here with a red line around. And this white line shown here is actually, too small, is actually the border of the Lake Indawgyi Biosphere Reserve. And that's where we work. Now, our project started in 2020, and that time, Chances for Nature came up with a deal. What we did is we offered the owners medical care for the elephants if they are not using them for illegal logging. And as a first step, we started to build up an elephant team, and it's a veterinarian and a biologist, and our boys, as we call them, started to set up a field station at Lake Indawgyi. And the work of our boys is supported by Gesellschaft. What they did after they started with the field station is they started to work as a kind of mobile elephant clinic, but they also invented an emergency call. Now, what they did further on was they visited all the villages and the owners. They registered all the elephants they saw. They treated cows, calves, and bulls. They sedated and fixed escaped mass bulls, and they also recovered the lives of calves that had been in crush. On top, they performed workshops for the owners and the Uzis. Uzis are mahouts in Myanmar. And I was very happy to get support from 2 German zoos. Zoo Berlin presented videos on foot care, and Zoo Wuppertal presented videos on calf training. And finally, our boys managed to establish an elephant owner association. And this is, again, a win-win situation because, of course, as a group, the elephant owners can better communicate their problems and needs. We can think together about alternative income possibilities. And of course, for us, it's good to have a group if it comes to nature protection questions or projects as a next step. Okay, so if we summarize, the elephant population around Lake Indawgyi has around 190 captive elephants, and they belong around 90 owners, and they live in around 20 villages. So you have between 1 and 13 elephants per owner, which is quite a lot. And you have between 1 and 21 elephants per village. But we also heard when we talked to the owners that there are wild elephants in the north of the lake. And this is not a wonder because we are actually in the north of the Myanmar elephant range area. So what we heard was that these wild elephants that are there, they usually only pass by one time a year. By the end of the year, they came and drink and swam in a pond of a monastery. And last year, there was a group that already arrived in summer, and this group is still there. And we think that there be maybe around 6 elephants, and there's now also a newborn calf, so we think it's a matriline. And of course, they are destroying the fields and the harvest from the farmers now, and there will be an upcoming human-elephant conflict. So we know now, it was not an April joke, but we knew now that there are indeed wild elephants, and therefore we started a new project this year. And sorry that Theo is not there anymore, but this project is supported by the Zoo of Cologne. What we want to do is first a survey by interviews in the villages. We would like to localize the animals by passive acoustic monitoring. We want to install camera traps and then try to identify individual elephants because, you know, once they have a name, they are more safe, they're living more safe. We want to raise awareness, and we also want to set up an emergency and warning system. And I need to say that in the area where we are, there is no project so far, so nothing. And why we want to do is we want to prevent human-elephant conflict. We want to establish a safe migration corridor for the elephants. And we, of course, want to protect these free-ranging elephants. And just to give you an idea, this is, again, a map from the lake. And we started to do the survey and to interview the people. And just to give you an idea, so there's the lake again. The red line here is the road. And we picked these 3 villages in the north for the interviews. And just look that here's this forest. Here's a little bit of forest. and here's the forest. So I think, or we think, that the elephants are moving between the forest, and of course they're always crossing over the human area, right? So whilst our people are doing the interviews in Myanmar, we already started to work on the passive monitoring. And first we were in Serengeti-Park last year because we wanted to know whether our microphones are able to detect elephant infrasound. Next thing, we went to Hanover Zoo at the beginning of this year to check whether our technique is working. And now, at the moment, we have a master student in Paradisa. They have 23 Asian elephants, yeah. And she's doing her master thesis, and her aims are first to test the two microphones, and second also to see how far the elephant sound would travel. And then, of course, we have a method to go out in the field and do future passive acoustic monitoring with the free-ranging elephants. So I presented a project on the conservation of a Myanmar elephant, and I was talking about captive elephants and wild elephants, but these two parts are actually connected because, as you can tell, 5,000 captive elephants will have an impact on the conservation of 200 wild elephants. And also in our project, these two parts are connected because, of course, we can use the captive elephants, for example, to track the wild elephants, to patrol in the area of the wild elephants, or even to use them to drive the wild elephants away from the field. We have to see how far we can get. But of course, life is not always easy. We had also some problems. We had in Myanmar also Corona, so COVID pandemic, and on top we had the military coup. So sometimes we were not able to communicate with our boys because there was no internet. The internet is controlled by the military, so they just switched it off, and we had no idea whether they were still alive or not. But or you might now think, hey, how can you work with a project like this under such difficult conditions? And I have to tell you that we can only do it because we are working and collaborating with local partners. And we also get a lot of support from organizations and many, many zoos. And with this, I come to the topic of this conference. So my talk not only covered the conservation of the elephants, but also the zoo research part. And if we are lucky and we save this forest, we can also contribute to biodiversity. Okay, and this is my last slide. I want to say Chetsuba, which is also Burmese and means thank you. I'm looking forward, if we have the time, for questions, or if you have comments, please come up. And thank you very much for attention.
Thank you, Ann-Kathrin, for your interesting talk. Are there any questions?
So focusing again on the overlap you mentioned between the captive and the wild elephants, my question is, would having captive elephants for the elephant owners attract wild elephants to areas where it's not good they're there, or not really? Do the captive elephants attract the wild ones, or not really?
Former times you had the situations that the female captive elephants were released to the forest to feed during the night, and the wild elephant would mate them. So sometimes you had babies that were produced by free-ranging bulls. I think it's not, there are not so many wild elephants there, but we have to see. Actually, we only learned now that there are indeed wild elephants, and we have this group of 6 elephants, but where there are 6 elephants, there will be more, and we need to find them and try to work about them, and then we can go ahead. It's, yeah, depending on what we find.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. A lovely presentation, by the way. I was just curious, and you may have said it during the presentation, which I may not have been aware of, but what about the 6 elephants that suddenly came in during summer? Did you find out how it happened or the reason for it?
We have no idea why they came so early this year, but maybe they were driven out of where they usually live, and they just arrived, found food, and stayed. Because usually the elephants only passed by. According to what the people from the villages told us, the elephants only passed by at the end of the year. So they were not really staying there. They were just passing by. That's why we want to establish the migration corridor, so that they can at least be safe while they are moving places. Maybe they just found that there's nice food to eat, and that might be a problem in the future, because then we have, of course, human-elephant conflict.
Ann-Kathrin, also thank you for that cool presentation. My question is, 5,000 privately owned animals that you can't use for logging, what is the future? What is the vision? What will happen with these animals? And my guess is it's a reproducing captive population, or can you expect that they will phase out?
The good thing is, answering the last question first, the good thing is that most of these elephants are reproducing. So we have indeed some small families, let's say, and of course they are selling elephants, but now there's no work. So the good thing is that we have an increasing number of matrilines, which is, of course, for welfare reasons, it's good. The point is concerning the future of these many elephants. So from these 5,000 elephants, 3,000 are Myanmar timber elephants. And that's government-owned elephants. And they have started project on reintroducing them to the wild. But I think that due to COVID and the military coup, of course, that this stopped. So I did not find any news. And what we want to do with our 2,000 elephants is completely different. They are privately owned. We have now the Elephant Owner Association. Now we can discuss with the group what we can do. And what I would like to do is actually to start a soft ecotourism. So introduce people to the elephants, let people learn about elephants, and then maybe have kind of walk with elephants, baths with elephants, and by this create alternative income for the elephant owners, because they are not allowed to take out wood from the forest anymore. But we have a lot of ideas. I was, for example, thinking what you can do with this lot of elephant shit that's there. Maybe you can use it to produce energy. Maybe you can dry it and use it to make fire, because then they don't need to cut the wood anymore. So there's a lot of ideas, but of course we were not able to visit the country, so we were not able to talk to them directly. So hopefully, if we are able to travel anymore, then we can exchange our ideas with what they think is good and possible. One last point. Chances for Nature produced a brochure, 10 years. We are working not only with elephants, we are also working with primates, and we are working on Madagascar and all over the world, more or less. So if you're interested in our work, you can please take along this brochure. And if you have questions about our work, Christian Roos is also in our team. Yeah, and I'm responsible for the elephants. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann-Kathrin. So now it's time for the lunch break. My colleagues prepared a nice buffet with finger food outside, and we will meet us back here in 1 hour. 1:25, we come back. 1:25? Yeah. Okay.